out here. And looking at observations over the African coast, pressure's down to about 1,008 millibars. So this is a pretty potent low pressure center. We'll monitor this one as it has the potential to develop once it comes off the African coast. All right. These
very deep convection. We're seeing the overshooting tops and deep reds and oranges. Means there's a lot of isolated thunderstorms and a good amount of moisture in that system. The other one we're watching is off in the Atlantic, the middle of the Atlantic. As of now, the National Hurricane Center has the one in the Caribbean with over a 50% chance of looking better organized. They're actually sending a hurricane hunter crew out there this afternoon, and as we get some more information, we'll let you know about it. The second one, not so much, about a 20% chance of becoming something developed. It's actually moving into heavier winds, and therefore it will start to shear off this.
Es lo que está ocurriendo en la parte más norte de la Florida, acá en el Panhandle floridiano, donde se ve claramente las tormentas que están ocurriendo debido a los remanentes de Faye, que continúa como depresión tropical. Y lo otro más importante es lo que está ocurriendo ahora en la parte del Caribe, muy cerca a Santo Domingo. De hecho, a 250 millas al sur de Santo Domingo se encuentra una depresión tropical que ya se formó en ese sector del Caribe, dejando precipitaciones en la parte de Santo Domingo y también en Puerto Rico. Sus vientos son por encima de las 25 millas por hora y se sigue desplazando peligrosamente, o sea que en cuestión de horas estará entre Jamaica y Cuba a una velocidad de 20 y 25 millas por hora. Vamos a seguir monitoreando este sistema que acaba de formarse en la parte del Caribe. Vamos a ver su transformación, su evolución.
We're at it again, tracking the tropics. A new storm born today, just as Faye leaves Florida, the Sunshine State now keeping an eye on newly formed tropical storm Gustav. Good afternoon, everyone. Hurricane warnings already posted for some areas of the Caribbean.
Yes, indeed. Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrow in the Storm Center with all the details. Phil?
You know, you just saw the cone. It actually appears like it's going to follow a path very similar to Faye, so we're just going to have to watch it very closely for the next couple of days. 60-mile-per-hour winds earlier today was just a depression, and then by 2 o'clock, recon planes went in, and they found that the wind speeds had really kicked up to 60, and because of that and the pressure dropping, they upped it to tropical storm status, 15.8 north, 70.5 west, moving northwest quickly now, 14 miles per hour, and the actual center of circulation around 225 miles south-southeast of Port-au-Prince in Haiti. Here's a satellite imagery, and it really looks good. You see the dark colors right here. That represents a lot of moisture to work with, and there's the potential for some heavy rainfall across Hispaniola and as it moves towards the north and east. But take a look at the visible satellite imagery. It is impressive. You can see that even though it is a tropical storm, it is developing a good center of circulation. So the potential is there for it to intensify some more. Most of the rainfall right now over Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. This is the radar out of San Juan, and you can see the feeder bands coming across the island, moving right over the Mona Passage and into Santo Domingo, and that will be the pattern tonight and tomorrow. They can see a lot of rainfall once again. So where is this system heading? We still have high pressure to the north, trade winds to the south, and then we have right up here some very strong upper level winds that could have an impact on the forecast cone of Gustav. You can see the high pressure will continue to push it in our direction. The National Hurricane Center is suggesting that sometime tomorrow it could become a Category 1 system, and they are hoping that by the time it reaches eastern Cuba, that the interaction with the land here will weaken it somewhat before moving into the Florida Straits. But notice that everyone from the Bahamas through Cuba should be watching this system very closely. I'll have a lot more on this on the local forecast coming up in weather.
Imagery, and then they went to they upgraded to a storm after the airplane got in there about 1:30 this afternoon. If you look at the forecast track, you'll see it. They're forecasting it to become a hurricane as it moves over Haiti. This will be about tomorrow afternoon, continuing basically towards the northwest, but then a little more of a turn towards the west near the end of the track here. And I want to be very, very clear that we understand how to use this track here. The Hurricane Center right now is saying that the center is going to be somewhere over western Cuba in 5 days. But what they really mean here is that it could be anywhere within 300 or 350 miles of that. That's why this cone goes way over here, covers much of Florida and all the way down in the northwestern Caribbean. 2/3 of the time, the actual track of the storm stays within that cone. So we really need to bear this in mind. Right now, there are several models that take it south of Cuba. There's one still to the right here, but there's still a lot of uncertainty. Those steering currents going to collapse a little bit. One thing, if you look at the satellite imagery here, it's not as impressive looking as it was earlier this afternoon. It's really gotten kind of ragged. There was a hint of an eye there for a brief period, but it's not looking quite as healthy now as it did before. Big threat is going to be rainfall over Hispaniola.
All right, Max, and here at home, as far as our own local...
Sur de la península de Barahona, en República Dominicana, moviéndose hacia el noroeste. Vientos máximos sostenidos esta noche a las 11 ya. Son de 70 millas por hora, o sea que esto se está aproximando a intensidad de huracán. Le falta unas meras 5 millas por hora y será clasificado como huracán. Tal vez mañana amanezcamos con el huracán Gustav sobre las aguas del Caribe, acechando a Haití, porque ya queda claro que el centro de esto no va a impactar a República Dominicana, solamente las lluvias y los efectos periféricos de Gustav. Pero sí Haití posiblemente vea un huracán categoría 1, Cuba tal vez el mismo caso, y noten como la zona de riesgo se extiende todavía sobre una amplia región desde el Caribe hasta la península de Yucatán, Cuba, claro está, y la Florida, tan al norte como Tampa. Esa es la zona de riesgo de aquí al fin de semana en cuanto a cómo se debe comportar Gustav, porque es la proyección de 5 días que hace el Centro Nacional de Huracanes. Esta proyección un poquitín más al sur de lo que fue la anterior, y todo tiene que ver con ese giro hacia el oeste, que yo creo que claramente pueden ver ahí, debería ser esta tormenta tropical o huracán en las próximas 24 a 36 horas. ¿Por qué va a ser ese giro hacia el oeste o debe hacerlo? Que es una cosa inusual, claro está, no estamos acostumbrados a ver ese tipo de giro. Pues eso surgiría debido a un sistema anticiclónico de alta presión que se va a fortalecer aquí cerca de la Florida. Y si es suficientemente fuerte, entonces el giro a la izquierda o hacia el oeste va a ser bastante brusco. Una buena noticia, o tal vez otra buena noticia esta noche, es que anteriormente había un par de modelos de pronóstico que insistían en que Gustav pudiera moverse hacia el norte o tal vez hacia la zona del paso de los vientos y por las Bahamas o tal vez hacia la Florida. Esta noche los modelos casi todos están de acuerdo a que ese giro hacia el oeste debe surgir, o sea que República Dominicana está fuera de peligro y el riesgo de que venga hacia acá, de que venga a la Florida, baja un poquito esta noche debido al hecho de que se están poniendo de acuerdo los modelos en que este escenario, con el sistema anticiclónico bastante intenso para hacer girar a Gustav hacia el oeste, tal vez sea el que se va a dar y eso sería favorable para nosotros, no tan favorable, claro está, para la...
As it begins to form from that disturbance we were watching west of the Lesser Antilles, watch as it comes through the Lesser Antilles here and then begins to become better organized once we get down towards August 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Here comes Gustav for the circulation that is, and there we go, continuing to improve with the showers and storms racing across the eastern Caribbean. All right, with that said, let's get to the very latest at this hour with Gustav, because this is what we're watching. It's a relatively small hurricane and aerial extent if you think about some of the sizes we've seen with tropical systems. Here's a look at the visible satellite shot here again. It's relatively small. Now, that can be good and it can be bad because small hurricanes have the ability to change intensity very rapidly. So this is something that we'll have to continue to monitor very, very closely. The very latest, winds of 90 miles an hour now. The movement is off to the northwest at 9, and the minimum central pressure is down to 981 millibars. And yes, we do think there will be further strengthening today before Gustav begins to have an impact or begins to run into some land interaction due to the higher terrain, the mountainous terrain there of the south coast of Haiti. But with that said, very heavy rain going to be one of the main threats with this system, along with strong gusty winds over Haiti. And over time, that heavy rain threat will be spreading throughout Jamaica and Cuba. 4 to as much as 8 inches of rain expected, with some areas, certainly in the higher terrain, particularly here some of the mountainous areas of Haiti, could see upwards of 20 inches of rainfall, folks. So we're talking about mudslides and life-threatening floods with this system as well. By the way, right now, Gustav is only a Category 1 hurricane, but I want to show you the projected path here because this is going to be very important as to where it eventually ends up and its future intensity. It's within this cone here that we have a lot of land areas. So, of course, whenever these tropical systems interact with land, that tends to weaken them. But say that this system takes a more southern route and stays over the warmer waters, we very well come the weekend could be looking at a major hurricane ready to enter the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. So anywhere from Florida, the Keys, right on back over towards Texas, and as well as the Yucatan, heading into this Labor Day weekend, you need to keep a very watchful eye on what's going to happen with Gustav. Initially, the impact's going to be felt into Cuba, and yes, this system could be strengthening even as it makes a run.
The day tracking Hurricane Gustav. Stronger storm apparently than it was this time yesterday. The Cat 1 already hitting Haiti and the Dominican Republic.
And that is the situation now. Here is a look at the projected path for the future. And there is some new information for South Florida as of the latest update.
All right, we are also working the latest images out of the Caribbean. The hurricane is packing torrential rain, spawning flash floods and mudslides. Look at those still pictures. In 24 hours, this storm has gone from a wave to a full-blown hurricane.
And depending on its course, it could strengthen a lot more. Chief Meteorologist Phil Farrow starts us off from the Storm Center. Phil.
You know, you just said it. It'll probably go into the record books as being one of the fastest growing systems ever, from basically a wave to a Category 1 system in less than 24 hours. It is still impacting the Dominican Republic and Haiti. Center of circulation right about here. The western edge exposed to the elements, but there's still plenty of rainfall and hurricane force winds on the backside, and it continues to track towards the north and west. This is the official forecast cone. High pressure will continue to push it towards the west. There is the possibility, as it emerges over the open waters of the Caribbean, that it could intensify further, becoming a Category 2 system sometime during the day on Wednesday, going into the Cayman Islands as a Category 3, and then everyone from the lower Florida Keys through western Cuba and the Yucatan should be on the lookout for the system as it continues to make its way into the Gulf waters. We're going to see Gustav for quite some time to come. Now let me show you the very latest advisory. Category 1 system, 90-mile-per-hour winds, 18.2 north, 72.8 west, moving northwest at 10, now centered 40 miles southwest of Port-au-Prince in Haiti. Now let me show you what is steering Gustav right now. We have an upper low sitting right here in the western Atlantic, and for a while there, this upper low was kind of drawing Gustav towards the north, but that's moving away. Now we have an upper level high basically sitting right over Florida, and that high will protect us here in the Sunshine State as it'll push Gustav towards the west. It's just going to be awful for our friends down south, Jamaica, Cuba, and of course Haiti and the Dominican Republic getting impacted today with heavy rain and strong hurricane force winds.
Vara in the Sat Center. Done.
Craig Belkey's Hurricane Gustav turned deadly by the time it struck Haiti. Torrential rains led to a massive landslide, and now one man is dead. Hurricane Gustav flooding the streets of the Dominican Republic, one of the first places hit. Streets turning into rivers, residents wading in knee-deep water. Then the storm strikes Haiti. He says Haiti is going to suffer the direct effects of this storm, the strong winds and the heavy rains, and it's also going to suffer the indirect effects such as winds blowing on the sea, which will create stronger sea storms and cyclonic winds. The streets look calm in the capital of Port-au-Prince, but toppled trees and flooded fields creating chaos amongst residents nearby. Hundreds choosing to throw rocks at officials instead of evacuating. Gustav's next stop will be Cuba. Heavy rains could flood the island nation, people there getting ready just in case. Here in South Florida, forecasters at the National Hurricane Center studying Gustav's every uncertain move.
The spread is rather large, so again, quite a bit of uncertainty, but interests along the western portions of Florida and as well as northern portions of the Gulf and Texas.
At MIA, flights canceled. Gustav hitting travel to the Caribbean, no one able to come in or out. Another hit could be to our wallets. Once Gustav clears the Caribbean, the final stretches down the Gulf. The storm feared to threaten oil rigs. Oil prices already spiking $5 a barrel.
At the minimum, there will be a disruption in the production, and in the worst case, we may have some damage.
Gulf states also on alert. Louisiana's governor saying he'll skip next week's GOP convention to ready the state for Gustav.
I'm going to make sure I'm here personally to help lead the preparation efforts, and if necessary, any recovery efforts that are necessary after the fact. As long as our state is in harm's way, I'll be here in Louisiana.
And cruise liners out of Miami taking no chances. Some trips detoured away from the Caribbean just to play it safe. Live in the Satellite Center, Don Guevara, 7 News Night Team.
The folks on the Gulf Coast feeling a little uneasy, but still a lot of possibilities. Here's what's going on. Latest satellite of Gustav, and interacting there with the Haitian Peninsula down there, the Tiburon Peninsula. And this is a mountainous part of Haiti as well as much of the island of Hispaniola, fairly mountainous. So a little bit of chewing going on, and it's really Gustav that's being chewed upon by the land there. So it's possible we'll have a tropical storm by the 11 o'clock advisory, but as of 8 p.m. still a weak hurricane, 75 mile-an-hour winds moving northwest west at 7. That doesn't mean that we're done by any means with Gustav, because once Gustav moves on to the west and over the open waters again, it will likely regain its intensity. In fact, could strengthen to a major hurricane by late in the week in this general area of the Northwest Caribbean, where the water is very, very warm and very deep. Warm water is there, and then much of the Gulf of Mexico is under the threat early next week and late in the weekend for Gustav. And you can stay up to date with Gustav.
I'll have a look at some of the scenes here, and over toward Haiti, getting flooded out with very heavy rain, and the rain still do continue, especially over toward the southeastern part of the country there. Max winds were 99 miles per hour. Now Gustav is a tropical storm. Max sustained winds of 70 miles per hour. All right, let's see what's going on now. And yeah, Gustav is off to the west of Port-au-Prince, situated right about in here, and now it is about 85 miles off to the west of Port-au-Prince, or as you can see here, 150 miles southeast of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Top sustained winds 70, so that makes it a tropical storm. And I would say that those top sustained winds are over offshore with some of those clusters right there. Moving off to the west-northwest at 8, almost due west if you look at the satellite imagery. So it's between that and west-northwest. Satellite imagery right here, I think you can see for yourself where the center of circulation is. Right in here, you can see a little circular area. That's the circulation center, the deepest convection. That's now off to that southern peninsula of Haiti. We're expecting once it makes its way over to the Caribbean Sea, south of the Windward Passage, that there will be more water there for it to re-energize Gustav. Here's a look at the water vapor imagery, and we have this upper air low here, so the outflow of Gustav has been restricted by these northerly winds. Once it slides a little farther over toward the west, we expect it to move somewhat farther away from the low and be controlled more in a pattern that would favor outflow aloft for it. It's also causing some of these storms to build very close to Puerto Rico. You have the low pressure center swinging the winds this way. You have Gustav taking the winds down here. So you have this area right in between of difluent winds aloft. That's favorable for those heavy showers and thunderstorms to develop. We're not looking
normally, and just a few weeks ago we were talking about a drought. So really, we need the rain, and we will take it, because that is good news for us here in South Florida. Where they don't need the rain is over in Haiti and Hispaniola, where there is the threat for flash floods and mudslides due to Tropical Storm Gustav. That's right, yesterday was downgraded from a hurricane to a tropical storm because it weakened as it moved over the high terrain of Haiti. Right now, it's located about 155 miles southeast of Guantanamo, Cuba, and the wind speeds around 60 miles an hour, expected to continue moving towards the west-northwest at about 5 miles an hour, although right now it's kind of stationary, not really moving and stalling and just dumping heavy rainfall for portions of Haiti and Dominican Republic. You can see that track taking it towards the west and northwest, possibly impacting Cuba or Jamaica as early as later today or even tomorrow. Then the Cayman Islands and Cuba still in that cone. And then as we head into the weekend, that cone of uncertainty very large, but the risk area is still encompassing now the Gulf Coast states all the way down through the Yucatan Peninsula. So all folks living around this Gulf Coast area, maybe you have friends and family that live in New Orleans or Mississippi or Alabama, even the panhandle of Florida, keeping a close eye on Tropical Storm Gustav at this time. Here's the latest satellite imagery. You can see there's still a lot of convection associated with it. Right now it's weakened a little bit, but once it moves over the warmer waters and also encounters less wind shear, expected to rapidly intensify. The latest computer models yesterday, they were in agreement that this would continue to track towards the west to the south of Cuba and then into the Gulf of Mexico. Really not much has changed. Those computer models indicating that it should take a similar track even today. Take a look at some of these models taking it right through New Orleans as a major hurricane. That's what the Hurricane Center is anticipating at this time. What you can anticipate for your local weather.
Emails tonight asking where is this thing going to hit in the U.S. and at this point it's pretty much impossible to pinpoint ground zero.
It sure is, Paul, and the thing is the circulation right now is very small, so if it remains this small, if it misses you just by 20 or 30 miles, you're not going to get those real strong hurricane winds if it is a strong hurricane. Currently, this is the latest advisory from the Hurricane Center, still 45 miles per hour, moving west-southwest. That's taken a little dive to the southwest, more toward Jamaica. Watch out for flooding rains overnight there in the higher mountain areas. And that's going to cause it to just delay a little bit as it goes around the corner and heads into the Gulf of Mexico. By the way, the Hurricane Center is now forecasting max intensity Category 2 in the northern Gulf of Mexico. They're no longer forecasting a major hurricane. That may or may not be the case. Just to give you an idea, last night at this time, the models that are making this hurricane the strongest were forecasting it to be, what did I calculate here, an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane right now, and we have a 45-mile-per-hour storm, and in just 6 hours, a 105-mile-per-hour hurricane. So they are way too hot on this one. It's very small. The wind field is so small, in fact, that we don't see any real wave growth from this one. It's mainly a rain event for now. All right, let's look at a couple of the features associated with it. There's the circulation up close, and you can see it's just taking a little west-southwest jog. So it's going to scrape over Jamaica over the next 12 to 24 hours. Watch out for flooding rains. As I mentioned, some of those rains will probably accentuate during the daytime hours over eastern Cuba as well. We'll keep an eye on that for you as well. So flooding rains there. Now, here's the projected path, still up, basically toward the central northern Gulf Coast, but it could be as far east as the Panhandle, and there's still some chance the upper Texas coast could be affected by it if it slows and starts to turn more toward the west. But the general direction in here, and somewhere up in the upper Texas coast, or upper Gulf Coast, about Category 2 in 5 days, near landfall or on land is the official forecast. But there's a lot of uncertainty in here still, and we'll continue to monitor it as it goes by the Cayman Islands here, probably as a hurricane by this time, or approaching hurricane strength, but not a major hurricane there. And again, a very small circulation, so not all the Cayman Islands will see hurricane force winds. Now, we also have another feature out here. Here are the Antilles. We're watching for this one to form into a tropical depression probably very soon. There's a low pressure center there, and it could affect Bermuda over the next 3 to 5 days and bring some high surf to the East Coast. The rest of the Atlantic is quiet. Paul,
when it gets there. Let's get right to our weather team. Hurricane specialist Max Mayfield and Chief Meteorologist Trent Air.
Yeah, Lori and Charles, looking at this storm tonight is looking really ragged on the satellite imagery. And here's the latest information. Winds sustained at 45 miles per hour, gusting to 60. So this is not only no longer a hurricane, but this is a weak tropical storm for now, as it has been interacting with Haiti. Movement is southwest now, and that's a change at 8 miles per hour. It's picked up a little speed. It was 3 just at the intermediate advisory at 8 o'clock, and the pressure has climbed almost back to 1,000 millibars, so you can see the storm really weakening. Give you some perspective, here's South Florida. Here is the storm with the center of circulation pushing to the west-southwest ever so slightly as it enters open water again, but you can see several factors here. It just looks rather ragged on the satellite imagery. Besides the interaction with land, there are a couple other factors. And Max, show us here on the water vapor what we're seeing with this storm.
Well, if we look at the water vapor loop here, Trent, you can see there's a high pressure system. This is in the upper levels of the atmosphere over western Cuba here, and the clockwise flow around that high is what's really providing some shear over Gustav here. This northerly flow coming down right over here is really, this is good news that it's weakening like that. So it's still, it sets a weak system now. The low-level steering is going to be moving it, and it's going to continue generally westward or maybe a little bit south of due west in the short term. And beyond that, you've got that long-range track.
Yeah, Max, and if we look at the National Hurricane Center's latest forecast track, there's good news not only with the strength of the system, but also for the Gulf Coast states. Let's show you what happens here over the next 24 hours. By 8 o'clock on Friday evening, a Category 1 storm is forecast to develop here, so it is strengthening here in the next couple of days. Now, from this point on, this is great news compared to what we had earlier today. It was a Category 3, a major storm in the Gulf. Now the National Hurricane Center has backed off that a touch to a Category 2, but there's still a chance. There are a couple of models that still have this as a major hurricane. A lot of uncertainty out towards this point, but if we can keep this trend growing, a weaker system and a weaker storm, that is going to be better news for the Gulf Coast states compared to that Category 3. But the cone of air is away from South Florida for now, and I want to go back to Max. Max, how much confidence does the Hurricane Center have in this track compared to what the models are showing?
Actually, I think the confidence is more now than it has been at any other time here. If we look at the computer models, and there are many, many models that we can all look at here, these are just the better models. The Hurricane Center verifies all of these. This purple one here is the Navy, United States Navy model that takes it into the eastern Gulf and closer to the Keys, obviously, in towards Alabama. The GFDL model we talk about so often here is this red model, the new hurricane model in the weather service, and the orange one here. So there is some scatter, but in general, that's pretty decent agreement. They're headed into the north central Gulf of Mexico.
All right, Max, as we come back here in main weather, we'll talk a little bit more about Gustav, also have a check on a couple of other areas of low pressure in the tropics that we need to monitor.
Yeah, let me first start by saying our weather here today, the next few days, very quiet, very enjoyable. Typical summertime weather, maybe favoring the spectrum of being fairly dry versus seeing much in the way of thunderstorm activity. Now, shifting gears into the tropics, a lot going on this morning. We now have two systems out there to watch. Of course, Gustav, which some interesting developments with this through the overnight hours, and now also our next system, tropical depression number 8, forming to the northeast here of the Lesser Antilles, northeast of St. Martin. So this system, with 35-mile-per-hour winds, in time will gradually track off to the west and northwest and will likely meander about to the east of the Bahamas. This is going to be a very interesting system, I can tell you that now already. All right, let's jump down to Gustav, because this system has been very interesting as well. It's reforming a new center off to the south and southwest of where it was yesterday. That's what the hurricane hunters found through the overnight hours. So this may have bigger impacts for Jamaica as we move into the afternoon hours today and tonight. 5 a.m. advisory, that system with 50-mile-per-hour winds. It's a tropical storm, but it is forecast to regain its strength as a hurricane and moving into the Gulf.
Our way out from Florida, here is now Tropical Storm Hanna, which is to the northeast of the Leeward Islands. This morning it was a tropical depression, but as you can see, the thunderstorm activity did intensify, and now we have a new tropical storm. So here's the latest position and statistics on Tropical Storm Hanna. Just barely a tropical storm with winds sustained at 40 miles per hour. I want to point out it's more than 1,400 miles east-southeast of Miami. So still well out in portions of the open water, gusting up to 50. It's moving to the west-northwest at a pretty brisk pace, 12 miles per hour. The pressure right now is at 1,002 millibars. So where is Hanna going? What can we expect as we go throughout the next few days? This is from the National Hurricane Center, and as we do go throughout the day today into Friday morning, remaining as a tropical storm well out over open water and continuing off to the north and the west again. Here is the eastern seaboard. Here are the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic. There's Puerto Rico. So by 8 a.m. on Saturday, still well out in the open water force, then increasing to a Category 1, turning just a tad towards the west by 8 a.m. on Sunday. Here is 8 a.m. on Monday and 8 a.m. on Tuesday. So slowing down a little bit and turning a little bit further to the west as we do go throughout the later portion of the forecast period. I want to step out the way to show you. There's Florida here on the Bahamas. So as we go into Tuesday, still possibly a Category 1 hurricane and slowing down a little bit, and it could stall. So we'll take a look at Hanna and watch Hanna as we go throughout the next couple of days. The forecast tracks all kind of in agreement except for one lone one trying to turn it way out back out into the ocean, which that's the track that we definitely would like it to take. As we take a look, here is Hanna. Now let's fly our way down to Gustav, and here is Tropical Storm Gustav. Right now, very close to Kingston, Jamaica, about 45 miles east. The center of circulation is of Kingston, Jamaica. So a large amount of rain has already started to fall through that country for us. Right now, it's 608 miles, I should say, southeast of Miami. Winds have not changed much, still sustained at 70, gusting to 85, moving to the west. It's slowed down at 5 miles per hour, pressure at 983. Now, what has changed is now interacting with land and possibly making a due west course or just hugging the coastline, increasing to a Category 1 later on this afternoon into the evening hours by 8 a.m. on Friday, making its way back out over open water, passing the Cayman Islands. By 8 a.m. on Saturday, a Category 2, and then making its way just over the western tip or in the Yucatan Channel as a major hurricane, 8 a.m. on Sunday. You notice that the cone, it does not include the Keys, does not include South Florida. So as we go throughout the weekend into portions of Labor Day and then into Tuesday, possibly making landfall Louisiana or portions of Texas as a major hurricane as we go throughout the next couple of days. So that's why there is a hurricane warning in effect for Jamaica and a hurricane watch in effect for the Cayman Islands. So definitely a couple of things that we are watching.
A lot better. And then this developing from a wave yesterday, early this morning, a depression, and now by this afternoon, a tropical storm. And let's begin with Hanna. A couple of things to take a look at. There is an upper low right ahead of it. The storm is actually going to border that low. The upper low is going to keep it weak. Then this high pressure system will start pushing it west. And by the time it gets here, it could be a Category 1 system. But a lot of things can happen when it reaches this little void in the atmosphere, and I'm going to show you in just a moment. This is what the very latest model runs are showing. A few of them have making a track towards the Bahamas and Florida, But take a look at this right here. Some of them really don't know what to do with Hanna. One of them actually has it turning right back into the Atlantic. A couple have them stalling out here. So there's still a lot up in the air regarding Hanna. 40-mile-per-hour winds, 20.5 north, 59.2 west, moving west-northwest at 12, 305 miles east-northeast of the Leeward Islands. Two case scenarios. I told you about an upper low ahead of busy. This morning, hurricane hunters went out and they found that it had actually gone a lot further south and that it had actually increased in wind speeds overnight, very close to 70 miles per hour, very close to being a hurricane once again. Here's the forecast cone. High pressure over Florida will continue to push it towards the northwest, possibly becoming a Category 2 by the first half of the weekend. And then as it makes its way over the open waters of the Gulf, a lot of warm water here, it could become a major system. And if this were a perfect forecast, it could be impacting Louisiana early next week. The model runs are in fair agreement. They do say that this will be a Gulf event no matter what. As we take a look at the very latest advisory, 70-mile-per-hour winds, but the most important thing is that the pressure keeps dropping, and that's a sure sign that it's trying to gather enough strength to become a hurricane. West at 5, 40 miles east of Kingston, Jamaica. And these are all the watches and warnings that are in effect.
About the intensity and the track. This really blew up early this morning. The thunderstorm activity really increased, and it was estimated to be a storm based on satellite imagery. If we look at the visible imagery, and this stopped about an hour ago because it's getting dark out here, but here's a little circulation center associated with Hanna. There's an upper level low that we talked about last night way over here, and you've got this flow going around the upper level low. But what's happened, that upper level flow is so strong that it's moved the thunderstorm activity off to the east, and that little low level center is exposed there. So it has actually has not done much here today as far as intensity goes. That's the good news. The not so good news is that upper level low is likely going to move out of the way, and it's going to have a better chance to strengthen here. If you look at the computer projections here, you'll see that they're moving northwest, but then after the 3 to 4 day time period, they either slow down or kind of meander around there. So that's this is something that is headed in our general direction. The reason for that stalling there or slow movement is the steering currents, and by the 4 to 5 day period, there's going to be a strong mid-level high pressure system up over the eastern Great Lakes, and the clockwise flow around that is probably going to block this from moving up to the north. And so rather than coming up and moving out like this, like some of the models suggested earlier, it looks like it's going to get blocked here, and it's going to be with us here for several more days.
All right, Max, so not only are we going to be talking about Hanna, but we still have Gustav to our south. And tonight it is also a tropical storm, as Charles mentioned, very, very close here to Jamaica. The latest information on this one, close to being a hurricane, 4 more miles per hour, and it'll be back to a Category 1 storm. Movement is west at about 6 miles per hour. This one obviously a stronger system with the pressure down around 985 millibars. And if we're looking at the forecast track on this one, it is forecast by the Hurricane Center to become a Category 2 storm by 2 o'clock on Saturday. All of South Florida remains out of this forecast cone in the days to come, but depending upon the wind field and how much moisture is thrown in our direction, we may feel some local impacts here as far as some frequent moving showers and thunderstorms. But as far as the damaging winds, it looks like for now that will remain here around Cuba and towards the Yucatan Channel. And some of the other changes, still a Category 3 storm here in the orange you can see on the scale behind me as it gets close to the Gulf Coast here late in the holiday weekend. So obviously a dangerous situation for parts of the Gulf Coast. But as far as South Florida, it doesn't look like Gustav will have much effect here. Lori, obviously there's a lot.
East midday. Let's take a look at this thing, guys, and you can see what's going on here. We certainly have a center of circulation down in here right now, and that continues to be an issue for many, many areas, especially along the Jamaica area. Just very, very heavy rain, but the system's breathing, especially on the east side, guys, and so that's going to potentially strengthen it and also widen some of those rainfalls.
All right, Jim, thank you very much. Of course.
Bueno, antes de hablar de las tormentas y del pronóstico local, quiero comentar de la situación en el lago Kichobi. El nivel está ahora por encima de los 14 pies. Ha subido casi 3 pies desde antes de la llegada, claro, de la tormenta Faye aquí al sur de la Florida. 14.02 es el nivel del lago. y pues vamos a estar viendo eso en breves momentos. También les puedo comentar, por cierto, que si vieron mis reportajes en cuanto a el lago Kichobi se refiere, en particular durante los especiales de huracanes que hemos brindado a ustedes aquí en Telemundo 51, pues ustedes saben que la situación del lago es muy peculiar en el sentido de que la represa o el dique que está localizado allí es un dique que está en precarias condiciones y por lo tanto no se puede permitir que suba demasiado el nivel del lago. Eso significa que las condiciones en ese lugar pues tienen que ser pues, manejadas con mucho cuidado por parte de la Agencia de Manejo de Aguas del sur de la Florida y también el Ejército de los Estados Unidos. Muy bien. Ahí está el nivel del lago, como les estaba comentando, y vamos a ver las condiciones actuales de temperatura. Son las siguientes. Las temperaturas están en los 80 a través del sur de la Florida, 84 en Miami y 85 en Fort Lauderdale. Bien, ahí están los dos sistemas tropicales. Está Gustav cerca de Jamaica y están viendo también a la tormenta tropical Hanna localizada al este del Caribe nororiental. Estos sistemas se están moviendo en general hacia el oeste y el oeste-noroeste, pero lo que se anticipa es que Gustav nos pase definitivamente al oeste de aquí, mientras que Hanna se va a ir acercando hacia el sureste de los Estados Unidos y, como ven, existe la posibilidad o mucho mayor probabilidad, digamos, de que Hanna sea un factor en el tiempo local de lo que pudiera ser Gustav, que tristemente parece que va a amenazar a Cuba como un fuerte ciclón y también partes de la costa del Golfo. Vamos entonces a pasar al...
Okay, tropical update time, and this way we're looking here, 11 p.m. advisory from the Hurricane Center. At that point, Gustav, 35 miles west-southwest Kingston, Jamaica. It actually passed right over Kingston today between 4 and 5 p.m. That was Thursday afternoon. You could see the wind shift from generally the west over to more of an easterly direction as it moved from the north over toward the south. Here's the latest satellite imagery, a lot of dark red here indicating that burst of heavy convection with the core of the hurricane or the tropical storm, almost a hurricane at 70. It's just crawling along the southern coast of Jamaica at this point. All right, as we check out the projected pathway here, we think over the next 24 hours it should be making its way over toward the Cape.
Atlantic, the state of Florida is sandwiched between two tropical systems, and one of them, namely Tropical Storm Hanna, could be headed toward the Sunshine State.
But it's Gustav that's the killer storm tonight as the death toll continues to rise. At last check, the system has claimed at least 59 lives as it heads toward the U.S. Gulf Coast. There is no doubt we are approaching the height of the season.
Yes, we are, and from the look of things, we need to keep a close watch on the tropics. Hurricane specialist Max Mayfield is here now, but let's begin with our chief meteorologist, Trent Eric, and the future trackable storms.
Yeah, Charles and Lori, we're going to start here with Hanna, the newest form storm today, and show you what's happening. Here is Gustav, just around the coast of Jamaica, the southern coast, and this is Hanna. It is about 1,300 miles away from South Florida, and tonight it is getting a little healthier. The winds have now gone up to about 50 miles per hour, gusting to 65. It was at 40 earlier today. We're moving west-northwest at about 7 miles per hour, and the pressure is at 1,000 millibars. And again, this is the latest 11 o'clock advisory coming in on both storms. Watching the forecast track out in time, the National Hurricane Center still indicating a Category 1 storm, but you can see at the end a slight shift to the southwest here as it really slows down late in the cycle here, 4 and 5 days out by 8 p.m. on Tuesday. And intensity is kind of a question here with Hanna. And I want to go to Max Mayfield now. Max, what are we seeing here as far as the intensity with Hanna with some of the environmental factors?
Trent, the intensity is really tied to this upper low that we've been talking about. And if we look at the water vapor loop here, we can see this very well defined upper level low east of the Bahamas here, and the counterclockwise flow around that upper level low has really been providing some shear over Hanna during the day. In fact, the little low level of circulation center became exposed and came out well away from the thunderstorm activity. But now that upper level low is definitely on the move, and in fact, as Gustav moves into the Gulf of Mexico and out of the way here, this upper low is forecast to move over Cuba and into the northwestern Caribbean. That's going to allow a pretty favorable environment for Hanna to go ahead and strengthen and will likely become a hurricane.
All right, Max, I want to talk a little more about the track here, what the computer models are doing. We've been watching these models here throughout the day, and one of the changes, it looks like all of them are now in agreement with not only the slowing down, but perhaps meandering here out into the Atlantic. The green model here, the GFS, that was one of the outliers. But Max, looking at this, it looks like the slowdown and also this erratic movement late in the forecast cycle, say early on Tuesday, that's pretty consistent now. What is the reason behind that, and is this rare to see all the models this erratic and in agreement?
Well, actually, that's pretty good agreement here, and there is a very good reason here. In 4 to 5 days, we're going to have a deep layer high-pressure system over much of the northeastern United States, and a lot of times when you have a storm down here like Hanna moving to the northwest, you know, they'll be picked up and turn out over the North Atlantic here. That's likely not going to happen here. This high is going to be so strong that it's going to block any northward progression, and it will likely either stall or meander around there, and then we'll just have to see whether it heads, you know, more towards the southwest, which could happen, or more towards the west like that here. We don't want to overdo this. Certainly, I think the message here is that in 4 to 5 days' time, we'll likely have a hurricane somewhere between the Bahamas and Bermuda, and we're going to need to keep an eye on that.
All right, a lot of uncertainty there, and we can see why. Big old area high pressure, the models with some erratic movement. There's other tropical systems out there. We want to talk about Tropical Storm Gustav, which tonight we've been watching the radar imagery out of Jamaica. It has a very well-defined center of circulation that's hugging the southern coast here. It has moved to the west now of Kingston, and over time, as it moves away from landmass and over a more favorable environment for development, the National Hurricane Center is confident this will not only become a hurricane, but a major hurricane in time as it gets close to the Yucatan Channel Saturday, Sunday, here the holiday weekend as we head through Monday. And it's going to be a very difficult forecast as it gets close to land, especially with this angle and that high pressure area to the north, possibly even slowing this one down. And Max, I just want to get your feedback on Gustav, because it's kind of rare that the models are in agreement not only with Hanna, but also with this storm.
They're, you know, for a situation like this, you know, 4 to 5 days away from landfall, they're in very good agreement here. And there are some of the models that take it over the extreme western tip of Cuba here and towards Mississippi. There's a few that head towards the upper Texas coast. Most of them are clustered in between there, so that's a pretty high confidence forecast track. But as you mentioned, that is a lot different than Katrina. If you remember, Katrina came across the southern Florida Peninsula into the central Gulf and then turned due north here and really made landfall perpendicular to the coastline. So this is going to be a lot tougher at that angle to nail the landfall point too far in advance here. But it is going to move over warm water. The upper level environment is going to be very favorable. And I think the hurricane forecasters would tell you that there's a lot more confidence in the track than there is the intensity.
All right, Max, when we come back here in a moment, we're going to talk more about the tropics.
The tropics, we got the 11 a.m. update just a little bit ago. Tropical Storm Hanna is north of the Leeward Islands, long ways away from Florida. You can see where we are and where it is. So for the holiday weekend, forget about Hanna. Now, as we get into the work week next week, toward the end of next week, then you're going to want to focus on it if it's coming in our general direction. Right now, where it's going, who knows? So enjoy your Labor Day weekend. As for Gustav, not a problem for us at all as it stays on this track. But it will be a problem as it really starts to go in some very warm waters over the Caribbean, probably for folks in New Orleans. So they're already making extreme preparations for that system to possibly make landfall. Tropical Storm Gustav as of 11 a.m., 18.6 north, 78.8 west, maximum sustained winds of 65 miles per hour. And the system is already starting to look like it's strengthening. Maximum sustained winds of 65 miles an hour, direction west-northwest at 8. Pressure 988 millibars and 165 miles east-southeast of the Grand Cayman Islands. So that's just the
11 a.m. advisory showing us it's 215 miles north-northeast of the northern Leeward Islands. The wind speed's right now 50 miles an hour, and it's still moving in the direction of the west-northwest, about 12 miles an hour. The latest satellite picture showing us showers, thunderstorms blowing up. Yes, it's expected to strengthen possibly into our next hurricane as early as Saturday, maybe even Sunday into Monday. You look at that risk area right now, encompasses the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Island. It's going to track towards the northwest, then generally in a westerly direction. Then after that, there's a lot of uncertainty, so we'll take a look at that forecast cone. And right now, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic in that track for Wednesday morning. Let's move on and show you the latest advisory for Tropical Storm Storm Gustav, located 165 miles east-southeast of Grand Cayman. The wind speeds right now 65 miles an hour, moving towards the west-northwest at 8 miles an hour. Now, the center of Gustav has moved offshore. We'll show you the satellite in a second, but you can see a hurricane warning is in effect for Havana, the western edge of Cuba, the Cayman Islands, a tropical storm warning effect for the rest of Cuba and Jamaica. You take a look at this satellite, you can see that it will be increasing and intensifying as it moves over the warm waters of the Caribbean and heads towards the Cayman Islands. There's the future track, still moving in a northwesterly direction. It looks like the western edge of Cuba may be hit hard as well as the Cayman Islands. Then continues on a west-northwesterly track, and that risk area still including Texas, the Gulf Coast, New Orleans, and the western edge of Florida. So here's a look at the scenario. Basically, we have an upper level low right now that in a way is helping to keep Hanna away from us and steering it somewhat towards the northwest. Now, this weekend we'll have to see what happens with that upper air low, because if it weakens and this ridge of high pressure that's expected to strengthen over the southeast builds in strong, that could help steer Hanna towards us here in South Florida and also carry Gustav towards the west, towards New Orleans. So we're going to have to wait and see and watch to see what happens with this ridge of high pressure, to see if it builds in, how strong it is going to be, and if it steers Hanna towards us. Of course, it's too early to say. We'll keep you updated, and we'll have more on this, on Hanna, on Gustav, and of course your local weekend weather.
As Gustav moves over the Cayman Islands, probably later on today and as we get through the evening hours, we can see from the visible satellite a center of circulation that appears to be getting a little bit more defined. And so it wouldn't surprise us if here over the next few hours that Tropical Storm Gustav became Hurricane Gustav. We'll continue to see it intensify as it moves out over open water toward the Caymans and then eventually toward the west coast of Cuba and then into the Gulf of Mexico.
Exactly. It is now off the coast of Jamaica and gaining more strength. 70 miles per hour right now, so only a few miles per hour from being a hurricane again. It got torn up over Haiti, again torn up over Jamaica. These storms want to be over water and water only. That's how they build. And this is a 70-mile-per-hour storm. There are the new coordinates and moving over toward Grand Cayman. Grand Cayman is right there. Got Cayman back, a little Cayman back there, but Grand Cayman right there. And it could be, and probably will be, a hurricane. Could be a Category 2 before it gets there to Grand Cayman. And then where does it go? Build a little bit tonight. It'll turn into a hurricane, and then it will be sheared apart as it gets pushed down into the Bahamas and over the Turks and Caicos over the next couple of days. Pretty decent storm right now. A lot of convection out there. They're not flying through this storm because, in fact, they're really more concerned about Gustav. But it does turn down toward Cuba, and then a few of the models turn it right back up into the Gulf of Mexico, following the same path as Gustav. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But what it would do, because Gustav has used up this water and cooled it off, maybe it wouldn't be such a strong storm. Betty?
All right, so Gustav sending us back information constantly. 70-mile-an-hour winds is what we're reporting now in the center of Gustav as it is making its way away from the island of Jamaica after dumping torrential rain, at least 8 inches around Kingston, more probable up in the mountain areas.
Coverage to go to Chad. What are we learning about Gustav, Chad?
An impressive storm, Wolf, and now even Hurricane Center says it will be stronger than they said 6 hours ago. I'll show you what's going to happen now. We bounced off Jamaica last night, and now it's back into the warm waters here in the Caribbean, heading toward the Cayman Islands at 75 miles per hour. Probably about 90 miles per hour by the time it gets over the islands, though, and then over Cuba. And then it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. And there's no way it's going to miss something when it gets there. There's just land all around it. Look how wobbly this track has been so far. That's why it's hard to predict where these things go. If it wobbles like that when it's really getting started, what could happen up here? Well, the winds are still taking it toward New Orleans. But the best case track is south and west of New Orleans, New Iberia, Lafayette, maybe back over to Beaumont, Port Arthur. We'll see. This is the cone. It could still be all the way to Pensacola, Mobile, or as far left as Houston, Galveston.
Bueno, vamos a pasar a la imagen de estos dos ciclones tropicales en pantalla. Gustav, que es huracán al sur de Cuba, y Hanna, que es tormenta tropical al nordeste de Puerto Rico. Ambos sistemas, por el momento, moviéndose hacia el oeste-noroeste a unas 10 a 12 millas por hora. Nos enfocamos ahora en la situación de Hanna, porque Hanna es el único sistema que en realidad pudiera tener un efecto, digamos, directo. Y esto, claro, es una proyección totalmente, digamos, prematura decir que va a tener algún efecto directo sobre la Florida, pero pudiéramos decir que si uno de los dos sistemas tiene algún potencial, por más mínimo que sea, de impactar directamente a la península floridana, es este y no el otro. Así que vamos a hablar bastante de Hanna. Viento de 50 millas por hora más bien, traslación oeste-noroeste 10 millas por hora, y ya vieron, o no han visto, perdón, esta proyección de la trayectoria del sistema. Uno que la lleva por 48 horas hacia el oeste-noroeste sin vacilar, pero luego se detiene entre 48 y 72 horas. Eso significa que se detiene entre domingo y lunes en las aguas bien al norte de República Dominicana y también de las Bahamas. Exactamente qué va a hacer cuando se detenga, bueno, entre las posibilidades existe que se vaya hacia el sur o hacia el suroeste o inclusive hacia el oeste. ¿Qué va a hacer después de que se detenga? La realidad del caso es que nadie sabe. Pudiera detenerse inclusive, dar par de vueltas en esa región y luego irse en la otra dirección. Esa es una posibilidad y hay un par de modelos de pronóstico que contemplan eso. Pero también hay modelos de pronóstico que contemplan la posibilidad de que después de que se detenga, pase por las Bahamas y se dirija hacia el área del sur de la Florida. Esa es otra posibilidad, al igual que pudiera...
Updated on Hurricane Gustav. Here's a look at it currently. We've got a broad cyclonic circulation and now starting to develop more of a tighter circulation around that center. We're trying to develop an eye here on Hurricane Gustav as it comes past the Cayman Islands at this point, and it's basically got very little land interaction here over at least the next 24 hours, and so intensification is likely within this. The latest vortex message from the hurricane hunters, by the way, has dropped that pressure a little bit more now, down to 975 millibars. So as the pressure drops, intensity goes up in most cases. So this is what we're looking at right now. It's becoming more well-defined today, that's for sure. And the immediate impacts are going to be the Cayman Islands. It's come past Jamaica now, but the Cayman Islands, and then beyond the Cayman Islands, it's going to be Cuba next, the western tip of Cuba. System at this point, it's as symmetrical as it's ever been in its lifespan, and you can see that we're getting a lot of convection or a thunderstorm activity right around that center of circulation and trying to form an eye here. If you look at some of the radar out of Cuba, you can actually see kind of a hole in there. You can see an eye that's trying to form here. Winds right now at 80 miles per hour. It's a Category 1 storm, but it is likely to strengthen here within the next 24 hours and then strengthen through the next 48 hours as well. Close-up view, here is Kingston, Jamaica. Jamaica was an island that got hit very hard by heavy rain. It's passed us by now. And if you can take a look real close here underneath the satellite imagery, we have Cayman Blanc, we have Little Cayman Island, and we have Grand Cayman Island right there. Significant impact on the islands from this system. I want to take you down on a flight through the islands here so you can get a
fade away as that sun is going down here. Winds around it, not too bad, but of course those hurricane force winds, a very small area typically.
Basically Cayman Brac and also Little Cayman, and also quite a bit of squall activity right there at Grand Cayman Island. It is going to go over Cuba, Pinar del Rio part of Cuba, that very western part. That's the part that's going to take the brunt of it on Cuba.
Here, this is Hurricane Gustav and Tropical Storm Hanna. We begin with Gustav well to our south. Right now, with the eye of the hurricane, or what was an eye earlier today, on the visible representation right now around Little Cayman. This is Grand Cayman, Little Cayman, Cayman Brac as it moves off to the northwest here at about 10 to 12 miles per hour. You can see on the satellite, it is a very healthy storm. It is gaining strength. At the 8 o'clock advisory earlier today, the winds were bumped 80 miles per hour, gusting to 100, and there's that movement northwest at 10 miles per hour.
Issued a bulletin literally seconds ago saying that it's a Category 3 now. So this is becoming a dangerous storm very, very quickly. Gustav has dropped about 24 millibars in pressure just in the past 24 hours, and you can see the two storms right there. Gustav, also Hanna out to our east. Now, concerned with both of these storms, this is the latest on Hurricane Gustav, winds of 110 miles per hour, but like we just said, a bulletin has just been issued, so those winds are now at about 125 miles per hour. It is moving to the northwest at 12 miles per hour, about 135 miles southeast of the Isle of Youth. Now, the latest track has Hurricane Gustav heading to Louisiana right around Tuesday morning. Could be slowed down just a little bit. An area of high pressure is trying to sink down to the south. Could slow it just a little bit. Also, a little bit of wind shear ahead of the storm could keep it from intensifying even more over the course of the next 3 days. But nonetheless, it is going to be a major hurricane, or is expected to be major hurricane or close to it by the time it reaches somewhere along the Louisiana coast. But you can see that cone of uncertainty stretching all the way from portions of Mississippi to the Alabama coast all the way down to Texas. So still a little bit of uncertainty. Miles per hour this morning, moving to the west at 12, 240 miles north of San Juan, Puerto Rico. This storm is expected to dip down to the south, only increasing to a Category 1 storm before it makes that dive to the south. It's just going to move in a crazy pattern over the next couple of days, but you can see South Florida in the 5-day risk area. So this is a storm that we're going to continue to watch very closely here in South Florida. Going to increase those winds over the next couple of days as well. Now we are, as we watch these
here, and I'll show you why in just a second. Here are the statistics, and you see the well-defined eye. Notice it's got most of the heavy thunderstorms on the west side. And that's why it's wobbling around a little bit, and it'll continue to wobble as it nears the west Cuba coast and then goes into the Gulf of Mexico by early tomorrow morning. But let's look at what's steering it and why it's strengthened and then where it's going. This upper-level trough is basically ventilated the circulation to the north, and it's already had this ventilation to the south, and that's why it's intensified. This trough is going to hang in there, but it's going to pull back to the west. You can already see it retreating slowly to the west, and then it'll lift out. And so based on that, our projected path is fairly confident that it's going to continue following that eastern side of that upper trough at least through early Monday morning. It's beyond that time it gets a little trickier. And what happens is high pressure comes down from the north associated with the frontal boundary, and it's quite possible the circulation slows and turns away from the coast before it gets here. In other words, here's one projected path where it comes up near Louisiana and turns away, and this is one of the newest, latest, greatest hurricane track models. Another one would be making landfall in central Louisiana in the center of the cone and then turning and slowing, and that would produce very heavy rain, and of course the other scenario is going up more toward the northeast, but still slowing and raining. And so depending on where that turn goes makes a huge difference, and it could turn before it gets to the Louisiana coast. Kelly?
Is off to our south, 120-mile-per-hour winds. It is definitely a very strong hurricane right now, a major one, Category 3. There's the eye. You can see it very nicely as it moves off towards the northwest. So there are hurricane warnings in effect for western Cuba, the Isle of Youth, and there could be some lower tropical storm force winds across the extreme western Keys, Key West, the Dry Tortugas, sometime tonight. But all of us are going to see rain bands from this and breezy conditions.
Gustav beginning to enter another phase of intensification here. We saw it take place over the past 24 hours with the initial 32 millibar drop in less than 24 hours, which brought it up to a Category 3. Then the pressure leveled off. What you're looking at are the hurricane hunters in the inside of Gustav, and I want you to note a couple of things here. Note the surface pressure down to 935 millibars. This is since the 11 o'clock advisory. We've almost seen a 20 millibar drop in pressure with the system. The winds have come up as well, and officially now at the 2 o'clock advisory, this is going to be up to a Category 4 storm with maximum sustained winds of 145 miles an hour. So indeed a very dangerous Gustav now, about ready to make a direct hit right on the Isle of Youth and then on into the western tip of Cuba, folks. And just in case you're wondering from at home, Category 5 is anything wind stronger than 155 miles an hour. So at 2 o'clock, this will be made a Category 4.
Good Saturday afternoon, everyone. I'm CNN meteorologist Jackie Jarrison, your hurricane headquarters with the latest on Hurricane Gustav. Now a very dangerous Category 4 hurricane. Maximum winds now at 145 miles per hour. The eye wall of this storm right now is directly hitting the Isle of Youth. So this is really bearing down and just incredible conditions at this time. The immense power of this storm, we're expecting it to stay very strong in the upcoming hours as it moves up towards western Cuba and continues to push in that direction toward the northwest. Heavy rainfall associated with this storm. We've already got showers and thunder showers across the Florida Keys, where a tropical storm warning remains in effect. Winds of 40 to 45 miles can be expected, gusting with these storms as they push on through with about 2 to 4 inches of rainfall.
With winds of 145 miles per hour, in order for it to become a Cat 5, those winds have to increase to 155 miles per hour. So as you can see with the outer bands here, it's closing in on western Cuba. It looks like here's the eye wall. It's got maybe 2 to 3.5 hours before it makes landfall. So in that amount of time, it could become a Category 5. But according to the last Air Force reconnaissance plane that flew into the system hours ago, it's a Category 4. The problem here is that in the southern Gulf of Mexico, and it will get back into those warm waters through the overnight tonight, there's an oceanic feature called the loop current. It's a warm body of water that comes from below the surface, and all that does is energizes a hurricane and intensifies it. You're looking right now at the hurricane warning over western Cuba. So
the Gulf Coast, let me just read them to you. Hurricane watch now for the northern Gulf Coast, east of High Island, Texas, extending as far east is the Alabama-Florida line, so that does include certainly Mobile, includes the city of New Orleans and Lake Pontchartrain. And then east of there over to the Lockney River, we have a tropical storm watch. Otherwise, things have changed very little. The winds, though, now are up to 150 miles an hour, so we'll be updating this graphic here very shortly. 150-mile-an-hour winds, still moving northwest at 14 miles an hour. Hurricane hunters have found a bit lower pressure now at 942 millibars. So again, hurricane watches are now up from High Island, Texas, along the coast of Louisiana to the Florida-Alabama border. That just means hurricane conditions could threaten in the next 36 hours. It is moving off to the northwest. There it goes. It's going to go across Cuba into the Gulf of Mexico, where the water is still pretty warm in the southern Gulf. I mean, deep, warm water. So it could still become a Category 5. 150 miles an hour now, sustained winds. Category 5 threshold is 156 miles an hour or greater. Hurricane Hunter is saying that this eye is now moving across the Isle of Youth and getting set to make a landfall there in western Cuba. Not a whole lot of topography there, not a lot of mountains, so we expect minimal disruption to the circulation. This is not like Jamaica or Hispaniola, where storms can get literally ripped apart, especially if they're moving parallel to a long mountain range. That's not the case here. Here's the radar out of Key West. We're getting plenty of rain now in the Keys. We've had a waterspout sighted at Key West. We had an earlier tornado warning in southern Monroe County around Flamingo. There's the center of the circulation, but look at these rain bands, which are going to now streak across the Keys, and now we have a tornado watch just issued for parts of the central and lower Keys. So although you won't get the worst of Gustav, you will get gusty winds in excess of 40 miles an hour. We've already seen a gust of 54 so far at Key West, with one of those squalls coming by about an hour, hour and a half ago. Where's now?
Well, and that's a perfect example of just how huge and ferocious this storm system is. So here's Cuba, the island, and here's Florida. You can clearly see the outer bands, extreme outer bands, reaching as far as North Florida. So those tower cams in Orlando and Miami certainly exemplary of what's going on there. Just in terms of the storms, a hurricane is just a cluster of thunderstorms, and isolated tornadoes, Peter, are certainly possible tonight due to Gustav over the southern Florida peninsula as well as all of the Florida Keys. So this is what we're looking at. It's a Category 4. What changed as of the 5 p.m. advisory, 5 p.m. Eastern from the Hurricane Center, is that the winds increased. They increased from 145 miles per hour to 150 miles per hour. So it's just shy of Category 5 strength. Cat 5 starts at 150.
Tropical saliendo, que las próximas 24 horas a 48 horas pudiéramos ver una nueva depresión tropical saliendo de las Islas Cabo Verde, así que vamos a estarla vigilando. Mientras tanto,
Mississippi. Now a look at the eye of the hurricane. There you see it. It crossed the Isle of Youth. Right now still over land. There is nothing to hold it back from here on out. It has open water over the Gulf of Mexico, and it has favorable conditions, very light wind shear, and we'll continue to track Hurricane Gustav. Again, not getting any closer to us than where it is right now. There is Hanna, and it is a ragged system. It is still a tropical storm. It is a couple hundred miles to the east of the Turks and Caicos Island, and here is the forecast track on Hanna, the tropical storm. It's not moving nearly as fast. Generally, a westward movement is expected, but look at this huge margin of error here, 2 or 3 days out from now. In fact, even 4 and 5 days out from now, a lot of uncertainty. We do know that it's going to be a close call as a tropical storm near portions of the Bahama Islands. And there's the latest on Hanna. Top winds 50 miles per hour. An upper low is holding that back from developing. So that's why there's a lot, again, of uncertainty as to where this might head.
Dealing with massive flooding even before Hurricane Gustav. Cuba prepares for a Category 4, maybe 5, right through cigar country. But aside from trying to secure tobacco crops, a huge economic resource, hundreds of residents are boarding up homes in anticipation of major destruction.
We have not seen a single person that wasn't either involved with the police or civil defense. Authorities say they believe this area will flood for 5 kilometers inland.
The greatest impact expected in Pinar del Rio, the western part of the island nation. 40,000 people evacuated. Government buses become shuttles. There are hundreds of homes not expected to withstand the 150-mile-per-hour winds.
A lot of houses here that it's a fairly sure bet, are going to lose their rooftops as this storm continues.
High winds and powerful rain smothered Jamaica Friday night. At the time, Gustav was a tropical storm. The system left flooding up to a foot high. A bridge collapsed. Some people play a dangerous game tempting the deadly storm.
Come back from there.
Parts of the Cayman Islands wiped out by Gustav, the military moving in. Flights to the Caribbean out of Miami International and Fort Lauderdale Hollywood pushed back or canceled. The area not a very pleasing destination right now. Streets look like muddy rivers. Several homes slip off hillsides. The devastation is widespread.
Gustav is striking Cuba right now, but is not expected to be over land very long, meaning the storm is not going to lose much. The death toll in the Caribbean is at least 81. Live in the Plex, Richard Jordan, 7 News.
Y justamente vamos a comenzar esta cobertura hablando de Gustav, un peligrosísimo huracán que durante las últimas 3 o 4 horas ha estado impactando directamente el extremo oeste de Cuba. Vean cómo el ojo del ciclón atravesó justamente esa porción, dejando mucha precipitación y mucho viento. Llegó a la costa cubana como huracán categoría 4. Actualmente ya está saliendo al norte de la costa cubana y se mantiene todavía como huracán categoría 4 con vientos máximos de 140 millas por hora. Así, en esa condición, el sistema está entrando otra vez a las cálidas aguas del Golfo de México, así es que por lo menos va a mantener tal categoría o incluso podría aumentar aún más la intensidad del ciclón a medida que se mueva un poco más hacia el norte. ¿Cómo se va a trasladar el resto de este fin de semana el sistema tropical Gustav hacia la costa de los Estados Unidos? Como lo pinta la imagen en pantalla. De aquí a 48 horas debiese estar llegando a un punto de Louisiana muy próximo a Nueva Orleans, dejando mucha precipitación en esa zona y también, por supuesto, mucho viento. Vea, se espera que llegue en categoría 4, muy peligroso avanzando a esa zona y lo vamos vigilando más de cerca. El sistema hasta ahora, por suerte, no se ha logrado organizar un poco más. Hay viento muy fuerte en altura que ha estado impidiendo que tenga más desarrollo, pero de todos modos tiene bastante actividad asociada, principalmente de lluvia. Y lo complicado con Hanna es que durante la próxima semana se va a estar acercando peligrosamente a Florida. ¿Qué tanto? ¿Por dónde? ¿Y cómo va a afectar el tiempo local? Lo veremos más adelante, por supuesto, en el segmento del tiempo.
Category 3. We're at Category 4 here. Category 4 winds start at 131 miles per hour, sustained. We're at 140 miles per hour, which is actually down just a little bit, a slight drop as Gustav pushed over western Cuba several hours ago, and the pressures have come up as well. Typically, the lower the pressure, the much tighter and faster the circulation is, the faster the wind speeds will be. So if you see pressures going up, this is a good thing, right? Our hurricane weakening slightly. Now for the bad news, right? As this continues moving towards the northwest, a lot of bath water here, very warm ocean waters. We're not foreseeing much land that could possibly get in the way of Gustav over the next 24 to 36 hours. You factor all that in, plus very favorable conditions in the upper levels, which basically means light winds. And we think it's going to hold at a major hurricane. May not necessarily strengthen that much. I mean, it's already at 140. How much stronger can it really go? This is an interesting satellite shot. Look, it shows you how this very well-defined eye, basically, we lose it on satellite imagery here. This is infrared satellite, so it's looking for the coldest cloud tops, and those come up the darkest brown. And what does that have to do with anything? Typically, the highest cloud tops come in cold. The highest cloud tops typically produce the heaviest rain. This is why we look for some of that. The darker some of these colors, it's a sign of health. Now that it's past Cuba, now it's past land here over water, we do expect it to at least stay at this current strength. Made 58 millibars, yeah, 9:41 when I came in a little earlier this afternoon before this made landfall here through western Cuba. And boy, do we have to watch a lot of areas here through the northern Gulf very closely, anywhere from Florida Panhandle all the way over towards the Houston area. Just wanted to show you this. If you squint your eyes, you can actually see the center of circulation right here. And as it passed over Cuba, this was one way to really have a good idea of where that center was. On satellite, we actually lost the eye wall there for a moment, the actual eye. On radar, it happened to stay together a little bit better, so it made it a little easier to track Other than that, we expect some squally weather, some windy times here, some very gusty winds across southern Florida over the next 24 hours or so, maybe even approaching 60 miles per hour. So we could be looking.
Yesterday it was a Category 4. Now it has been downgraded to a 3, but still a very dangerous storm. It is a Category 3 storm. Look at the winds at 125 miles per hour, gusting to 145. This just came in a little bit about an hour ago. The latest advisory moving northwest at 16 miles per hour, and it's currently over 300 miles to the southwest of us. Now I want to show it to you as we zoom in. It definitely had an eye to the storm when the winds were up to 145 yesterday and last night as it crossed the Isle of Youth right across western Cuba. Now the hurricane hunters are out there checking it out. It lost a little bit of oomph because of the interaction with the land, and they're looking for the eye to reform somewhere around in this vicinity. Coming up this morning, the sea temperatures out in the lower Gulf are very high, and also the depth of the water is very thick. So again, we do expect strengthening to go on as we go through the course of the day, and some of the outer bands are affecting the Keys right now. Janine Anderson will be showing them to you in just a second.
Hours or so that it has weakened just a smidgen. Now the maximum winds down to 115 miles per hour. And our satellite picture is showing a little bit more ragged configuration with this hurricane, as there appears to be some dry air intrusion coming on through. And the deepest convection, meaning the heavier, squallier weather, is primarily south of the center of circulation. But irregardless of all that, this is still a major hurricane. It's still a Category 3, a very dangerous hurricane, and it continues to draw closer towards the coast as it continues to move at a fairly brisk pace at about 17 miles per hour.
The tropical storm force winds are still well offshore, and the hurricane force winds are near the center of the circulation. So we're fine now around the Gulf of Mexico. But tonight, late tonight, that's when conditions will go downhill, and tomorrow things are going to be flying around. We,
of course, have Gustav that's right now over the southern Gulf of Mexico. Then we have Tropical Storm Hanna that bears watching as it continues to approach the Bahamas. And then upstream from there, 2 other vigorous tropical waves. One is about 900 miles or so north of the Leeward Islands. But there's another vigorous tropical wave that has just come off the Cape Verde Islands here. So definitely a very busy, very active weather pattern throughout the tropics. And now with more details, though, on Hurricane Gustav, let's go back now to Dave.
Thanks, Cheryl, and all this activity is right on time. We are getting into the heart of the hurricane season that runs from mid-August through mid-October. And here we are with Gustav. Then we'll make our way out over the Atlantic Ocean. Boy, it was a beautiful day here in New Orleans right now, but you know what? After dusk this evening, anyone on the streets, from what I read, will be arrested. There's a curfew. Conditions are going to go downhill in New Orleans, especially after midnight tonight with the approach of Hurricane Gustav. Still a major hurricane, no surprise.
Storms, a lot of the heaviest thunderstorms on the south side, so this is kind of a lopsided storm, and that's why it did not become a Category 4. It is no longer forecast to become a Category 4. Could it happen? Yeah, it's a slight possibility. The heavy rain right now approaching the coast, tropical storm force winds right about there. Those will be moving on shore, and then hurricane force winds, especially after midnight tonight along the northern Gulf Coast. Here's the 5 o'clock advisory. Winds 115 miles an hour. It's racing to the northwest very quickly at 18 miles an hour, and it is a Category 3. It's expected to make landfall tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon along the Louisiana coast, maybe as far west as the northern part of Texas, as probably a Category 3, which is a very dangerous hurricane. Storm surge 10 to 15 feet is possible in those low-lying areas. After that, the storm really slows down, and it's just going to drench Texas and Louisiana with flooding rainfall. Okay, looking at Hanna, it really is still very disheveled and very disorganized right now. The center of low pressure right there. We've seen a little blow up of convection near the center of the storm, but overall a lot of wind shear, and the winds are still 45 miles an hour, so it really hasn't changed in its intensity. It's moving to the west right now at 10 miles an hour. It should actually slow down over the next 2 or 3 days. So through about Tuesday or Wednesday, it'll go very slowly, may even dip to the south briefly, but the natural tendency of these systems is to move to the north. Most of our computer models honing in on a solution now. The center of the cone, North Florida into Georgia, South Carolina, but it could be as far north as North Carolina, and there are still some solutions that take it into South Florida. So we should be watching this closely. Keep tuning back in to CBS4 and CBS4.com for the latest information. But Thursday is the day that we have
track. Jim?
Well, Bob and Jackie, already tonight, tropical storm force winds have begun buffeting the southern coast of Louisiana. And it is expected that by midnight tonight, they'll begin feeling hurricane force winds. Now, hurricane force winds presently extend some 70 miles from the center. A 10 to 14-foot storm surge is expected with this storm. And with a storm surge that deep, St. Mary's Parish could be inundated in a worst-case scenario, among other places. We expect that the 10 to 12-foot or 10 to 14-foot storm surge will be occurring just to the right of landfall in the eye wall area. Now, we are expecting that it will make landfall sometime between 12 noon and 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Storms of this size are capable of doing severe damage to homes of average construction. Some industrial buildings may be destroyed, and electricity and water could be unavailable for days, if not weeks. If you want a more interesting perspective on this storm, check out our website, WGNTV.com, and take a look at the WeatherBug webcams along the Gulf Coast, plus some expansive coverage in tomorrow morning's Chicago Tribune.
Tropical Storm Hanna. But these two aren't the only games in town. We have two other areas. Yeah, number 3, number 4 here are watching in the Atlantic as well. This is definitely of huge interest. This, not so much, being kind of sheared out and should not really affect the Lesser Antilles or the East Coast of the U.S. at all. That is some good news. But let's take a look at our really an area of interest here. This low came off of Africa and is still holding a pretty good circulation. If we didn't have Gustav, if we didn't have Hanna, you know, we'd be all over this. This could be a tropical depression at any moment, perhaps a tropical storm in the next 24 hours or so. That next name in the line would be Ike. So, yeah, we might be becoming very familiar with Ike over the next couple of days. But something we're very familiar with right now and have been since last week is Hanna. Tropical Storm Hanna, sustained winds 45 miles per hour. It's not a super strong tropical storm right now. And the thing that's actually hurting Hanna is what's eventually going to pound the Gulf Coast, and still pounding the Gulf Coast tonight. It's Hurricane Gustav. The outflow from that hurricane is suppressing the west coast, or the west side of this tropical storm. The center is actually, let's see, here's Grand Turk Island, so just northwest of here. That's where the center of Hanna is. And you're seeing Hanna is not looking very healthy. Definitely seeing some convection, some stronger thunderstorms to the south side, but the east, the west and northwest side, north side, not a whole lot of action right now with Hanna. But as Hurricane Gustav makes landfall, we're going to see this outflow cease, and then we're going to see a better breathing pattern, or a better chance for this storm to really start breathing and expanding, and unfortunately getting better organized. And that is some not good news at all across the Bahamas or even parts of the southeastern U.S.
And even seeing a bit of an eye trying to form again, so could be looking at some strengthening. It has weakened, though, through much of the day. Cuba really took a lot of the wind out of the sails of this system. It's had a hard time regaining strength. 115 miles an hour now makes it on the weak side of Category 3. Category 3 starts at 111 miles per hour. Could be looking at some slight strengthening, though, as it continues moving towards the northwest. Nonetheless, it is a major hurricane, and as this continues moving northbound, conditions will deteriorate. We're going to be looking at huge swells pushing in. Some of the biggest swells we think will be through the Florida and Alabama coastline, 20 to 25 feet. And anywhere near the center and points just east of the center at landfall, could be looking at a 10 to 15-foot water level rise. So if you're in a low-lying area, you see how the surge could be key for you, plus inland flooding.
Winds now being reported with the gusts as far as near Boothville and down toward Pilot Town and Venice. We are looking at winds well over tropical storm force. We've even had the gusts reported at Southwest Pass of 75 miles an hour, so some very strong winds. Now, looking at this satellite imagery, it's our infrared enhanced, and you can see the purple area. That's where we do have the heaviest of the rain, and that's where we're going to be seeing the strongest of those winds as well. And there's about the center of circulation. You kind of see it moving right in that direction. Now, as far as landfall is concerned, we're looking at it to perhaps head a little bit farther to the west of New Orleans. You can see, though, this is getting very close now to the southwestern corner, or the southeastern corner, rather. The eye is still offshore right there, but those strong winds will continue to move closer to your area. Wave heights, definitely a problem, but look at this, the highest of those heights, perhaps getting a little bit better organized, but still we're dealing with a lot of wind shear blowing those cloud tops off to the east. But again, farther off to the south, we're going to be getting that squally weather coming into the Bahamas, and you're going to be dealing with that over the next couple of days, as a matter of fact. But a big flare-up of convection here over the past several hours. But we're not looking...
Actual ghost town as Louisiana carries out the largest evacuation in its history. 2 million people nearly fleeing Hurricane Gustav. Joining me live now from Miami is Bill Reed. He's the director of the National Hurricane Center. Thanks for being with us. We'll try it again. We had a little trouble hearing you when we first went to you. Tell us now the latest information on the track and the strength of Gustav, Bill.
Okay, Gustav is still a Category 3 hurricane, packing 115-mile-an-hour winds. It's moving onto the coast of Louisiana now. Hurricane conditions should be occurring along the immediate coastline. We're seeing reports now of sustained tropical storm force winds within New Orleans proper. It should move to the northwest at about 15 miles an hour as it comes inland, which will have it pass to the south, southwest, and then west of the New Orleans-Baton Rouge corridor. The communities along the coast near the west bank of the Mississippi are the ones most prone to the hurricane conditions, and we're anticipating still a 10 to 14-foot storm surge in that area.
So what is the most dangerous element of this storm potentially? Is it the winds? Is it the rains?
Well, initially, I would say it's a combination of the storm surge and the wind. If people stay down on the immediate coast there in the Grand Isle over towards Vermilion Bay, and they're in very low country, we're going to have storm surge conditions near this center. I hope they got out of harm's way. Then the wind and the trees coming down all the way inland, passing along a large chunk of the coastal plain of Louisiana, will have at least gusts to hurricane force, and probably into portions of central Louisiana this afternoon and this evening. So trees coming down, storm surge, and then the flooding will be the third element we worry about from the rainwater. We still think 6 to 12 inches of rain are possible.
All right, well, we'll continue to check in with the National Hurricane Center. Bill Reed, thank you very much. Right now, we're going to...
The storm surge will not be as strong, so we're keeping our fingers crossed for that. Here's the very latest satellite imagery. It is now a much compact system, center of circulation right about here. But take a look at all those dark colors. That represents a lot of heavy rainfall. New Orleans already clocking in at 91-mile-per-hour winds. Here's the very latest radar imagery. There's New Orleans getting pounded by the rain bands, and the eye wall right here just coming ashore across the mouth of the Mississippi River. Now, it's taking more of a jog towards the west, and that's good news for New Orleans, but it looks like it's going to make landfall somewhere over southern Louisiana, possibly Grand Isle. Category 3 system, 115-mile-per-hour winds, 28 point.
There is also great concern about what could happen in New Orleans because the levees that are being tested starting this hour are to the south and to the west of New Orleans, and these are
stronger winds is coming close to the coast, heading up. It's just, it's right along the coast now. Houma, Louisiana is just to the northwest of the circulation. It's about ready to go downhill there. Heather, Marshall?
It is very close to the coast. It looks like it may be coming around the coast just south of Houma, Louisiana.
Yeah, and what a morning it is for these folks along the coastline in Louisiana and Mississippi. In fact, we were just watching Mike Seidel in Gulfport, Mississippi, and he is just getting spanked by those winds right now. Mike, give us the latest.
Hey Heather, we are in Gulfport this morning, as we have been all morning, and boy, these winds are really cranking up. These bands in.
Concern now is certainly the potential for some wind damage, power outages, severe weather. We've had a lot of tornado warnings this morning, especially over in Mobile County, in Alabama, Escambia, Santa Rosa, the western Florida panhandle. And here we had a water spout earlier that knocked out power briefly, but the power came back on. Hard to tell. The power's on here, but they have a generator going. I want to show you Highway 90. It's hard to look south because these winds are sustained at about 40 miles an hour. But look at the highway. It's now being breached by the Gulf of Mexico over by the casino. We haven't seen that all morning. We're thinking the surge now is about 4, maybe 5 feet. We're not concerned about the water getting over here, but boy, that's why they've shut down Highway 90 across the state of Mississippi. And keep in mind, during Katrina, it was under 20, 25 or more feet of water, and a lot of it just was ripped up by the surge from Katrina 3 years ago. Here, we have not seen any significant damage from my vantage point. Again, I'm looking at some of the homes in the distance. I don't see any shingles off, but no doubt when we get these wind gusts up over 60 miles an hour, we're going to have some issues. Surge. Rest of the afternoon, we don't think it's going to get any. Concern is, if you look at Titan radar, not only the bands that are impacting those of you to our east, over around Mobile and Pensacola, we've had all those warnings,
But over here, we've got those bands and those bright colors to our south that still have to rotate in here. So we're still going to have a lot of wind.
When they heard about Gustav, there you see it. Look at the eye. Look at coming right over it. Said that what Katrina did not destroy back in 2005, it looks like Gustav could destroy in 2008. This is an oil and a gas town, folks, and they've been very worried about Gustav and whether they would get a direct hit. It appears that they are. We're going to try to find out exactly what they are going through. We're going to check back in again with Marianne Silber on the flooding that is happening now in New Orleans right after this break.
Being investigated by the reconnaissance aircraft, and they found some gusts of hurricane strength very close to the surface. This could become a hurricane very quickly. At least the next advisory or an intermediate advisory, those winds are likely to go up. The problem with this one is it's going to be trapped by a ridge of high pressure, and what that means is it's going to come back toward the U.S. coastline. So anybody from North Florida to Georgia to the South Carolina to southern North Carolina needs to monitor this very carefully. And notice the time frame on this is not that long. We're talking about 3.5, 4 days before potential landfall from this one that could become a hurricane before not too much longer.
Now let's go to Kelly with more on the radar picture where there's a potential for more tornadoes.
That's right. We have the severe weather threat running quite high, and you can see all the rain bands circling around that center of circulation that officially made a landfall, by the way, near Cocodrie, Louisiana, earlier this morning. And the system continues to move toward the northwest at 15 miles an hour. And out ahead of that, on the east side of that center, we're seeing all that moisture being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico. And as with any landfalling tropical system, meeting up with land, and of course there's friction involved here, you can get tornadoes spinning up. And as a matter of fact, we have several tornado warnings in effect across portions of Mississippi and even on over towards the Mobile, Alabama area. We hope to have more on that for you shortly, but right now we're going to head on over towards Bill, who's talking to Jim Cantori on the phone, I believe.
That's right, Kelly. Thanks a lot again. It looks like we have video back with Jim Cantori here. He is in Houma, Louisiana. And Jim, now that you see the damage outside, what can you tell us?
Well, I mean, it's just been horrible around here. I mean, take a look. This is the building that we had, the St. Francis Youth Center. You can see it, the roof peeled back here. And there it goes. It's still going. Look at that. Look at that. And that's the whole point, guys. We can't get out of this eye wall here. It just continues to rip off pieces of roof from this youth center. We've obviously pulled our truck over here to get out of harm's way. Look at some of the big chunks of tar paper that have come off here and are just laying in the parking lot. Let's go back up to the top of the roof, guys, because we're going to get another big gust, and we could easily lose more of this. Now, just to let you guys know what we've seen here and what we've lost, on the back edge of this building, there is a brick wall, and we have a
direct path to the southeast, so everyone has the potential to be struck by Hanna in the days to come. This is a brand new tropical storm by the name of Ike. It was a depression just less than half an hour ago. 50-mile-per-hour winds moving west at 16, over 1,400 miles east of the Leeward Islands. And take a look at the forecast cone. High pressure to the north. We have the trade winds to the south. Could become a Cat 1 by Wednesday. And by the first half of your weekend, it could be to the east of the Bahamas. And then after that, it could be heading in our direction. And that is not all. There's Gustav, Hanna, keeping an eye on 2 other areas of disturbed weather. And then here's another system coming off the west coast of Africa that could be a depression very soon.
In coastal Louisiana, and it continues to move on just to the north and northwest of Lafayette, Louisiana at this time. And you can see the southern half of the hurricane at this point doesn't contain as much rain as parts of the northern, definitely the eastern half of those stronger squalls coming in right off the Gulf of Mexico, even as far east as Mobile and Mobile Bay getting hit pretty hard. And of course, we still have this tornado watch up for portions of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana throughout the night, and expect these to continue right through tomorrow. And our severe weather expert has said he's expecting reports of tornadoes right on through perhaps Wednesday. I have to remember, just last week with Tropical Storm Faye, we had over 71 reports of tornadoes days and days after the initial landfall.
Yeah, today's 9 reports because of Gustav maybe seem 14, a little paltry. Oh, up to 14.
Leeward Island, so it's still a ways out towards the Atlantic. And in fact, if we didn't have Gustav and even Hanna, we would have jumped on Ike a lot earlier, but yeah, we had landfalling hurricane, another one threatening in a couple of days. And the good news about Ike, it is a long way away, but the bad news about Ike, it continues to move fairly quickly, which would also bring this towards perhaps the Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, and the western Atlantic as we head on towards the end of this week. Eventually, could still threaten.
Right, this is Hurricane Hanna. It is now to the south and east of the United States and right near the Bahamas. The wind's now 80 miles an hour. It has been undergoing some shear, but holding its own nonetheless. nonetheless, and we think eventually the environment is going to become more favorable. It is forecast to get a little bit stronger as it continues up through the Bahamas, where hurricane warnings are now in effect, and it will climb up, we think, past Florida, making its way potentially towards Georgia or the Carolinas later this week. We'll talk more about that forecast coming up.
And also, Hanna will definitely be the center of attention later.
Gustav, que ya no es huracán, ya es tormenta tropical porque ha perdido fuerza sobre tierra en suelo del estado de Louisiana. Como pueden apreciar, hay una gran cantidad de lluvia aún afectando al estado, y también la precipitación más fuerte se localiza muy cerca de la ciudad de Nueva Orleans, donde afortunadamente no ha habido inundaciones serias. En realidad no ha habido problemas con los diques, aunque sí hubo algo de agua que entró en la ciudad. En general no ha sido un problema muy grave. El impacto más fuerte de Gustav fue justo a lo largo de la costa. Comunidades al suroeste de Nueva Orleans, como la zona costera de Houma, una de las ciudades más afectadas, por lo que fueron vientos sostenidos hasta 100 millas por hora, lluvia de 6 a 12 pulgadas y una marejada que se midió 10 pies o más de altura, marejada ciclónica que impactó a esa región del estado de Luisiana. La tormenta Gustav esta noche ya solo tiene vientos de 60 millas por hora. Llegó como categoría 2 a la costa esta tarde con vientos de 110 millas por hora, pero desde entonces en su traslación sobre tierra ha ido perdiendo fuerzas. Algunas ráfagas todavía pueden alcanzar 70 millas por hora. Noten que sigue moviéndose hacia el noroeste a razón de 13 millas por hora. Pero como bien dijeron, esto no es lo único que está ocurriendo en el trópico. Tenemos dos otros sistemas. El nuevo huracán Hanna. Hanna, claro, la veníamos siguiendo como tormenta tropical, pero esta noche es huracán, está prácticamente estacionada en la parte oriental del archipiélago de las Bahamas. Y la nueva tormenta tropical Ike es esta que ven acá, que se mueve directamente hacia el oeste. Y más adelante les estaré diciendo hasta dónde se espera que Ike vaya moviéndose.
The Atlantic Basin right here. This right here is Tropical Storm Ike, which has not strengthened overnight. It has winds of 50 miles an hour. And here's the official forecast track and intensity from the National Hurricane Center. Becomes a Category 1 hurricane as early as maybe tomorrow, and after that, it could become stronger. In fact, it's possible it could become a major hurricane, and some of our computer models show that. But notice where it's located as we head towards the weekend. Saturday and Sunday, somewhere near the Greater Antilles, maybe approaching the southeast Bahamas. This is certainly another storm we're going to have to watch very closely as it makes its way towards the west. And here are the latest computer models for Tropical Storm Ike. Again, expected to strengthen as it moves over the very warm waters of the Atlantic. And notice that most of the computer models end up somewhere near Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Some of those computer models do drag it further towards the south, but 5 days away, it is just too early to forecast that. Our main concern over the next several days is going to be Hurricane Hanna and its local impact on our weather.
I mean, what happened? It looked like it just got flattened here, the north side of this tropical system. You know, what is happening with this? It's very disorganized at this point. If we look at our water vapor imagery, this is moisture at the middle of the atmosphere and higher. We can pick out features like upper level troughs, dry air, the orange indicating the drier air. Also, the pattern of the moisture, where you see the whiter colors, that's indicating the pattern of the upper levels or mid-levels. And look at that. What's happening is that upper level trough, that upper level low of the northeast, pushing down a little bit. So we're getting some of the outflow here from Gustav. That's what this is right in here. And we have this trough deepening off the east coast, and it's squelching everything to the north of this tropical system. However, the forecast expects this trough to lift out, and guess what? This thing then has a chance to become better organized again, and that's why we continue to have hurricane warning.
You can see the outflow at this system pretty well defined. So right now forecasting some intensification here over the next couple of days. It is still a tropical storm. Wind 65 miles per hour, gusting to 75. Movement is pretty brisk here. It's 17 miles per hour. And you can see the forecast track. It is forecast to become not only a Category 1 hurricane, but a Category 2 in time. We pause it 120 hours out here by 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. This forecast track is into the central Bahamas or as far south as Haiti and Jamaica. So this one is going to be moving west, and on the heels of Hanna, we're going to have to turn our attention to Ike here. And Max, the computer models are amazingly clustered with this system.
They are, and what's happening in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, there's a high-pressure system to the northeast of Ike right now. That high-pressure system is going to move along with it like that, and as the high builds in like this, that's what's going to keep it down to the south and steer it in our general direction here. So if you look at those computer models, you're absolutely right. They're in pretty good agreement as far as being here somewhere between eastern Cuba and the southeastern Bahamas here within 5 days. There's one model out here This is the United Kingdom Meteorological Office computer model that is showing a little bend to the northwest. That's the only model that's doing that right now, and the Hurricane Service doesn't believe that yet.
All right, Max, and from Ike, we got to mention Josephine here, the 10th named storm of the year. This one is way, way, way off towards the west here on the coast of Africa, here the Cape Verde Islands. This is the actual western coast of Africa. Now, with this storm, it is 3,738 miles away from South Florida, so we're going to take a deep breath here and concentrate on Hanna and Ike.
Esa zona de incertidumbre, pero también el radio de vientos que se anticipan con Hanna. Hanna, entiéndase que se pronostica pase al este de aquí el jueves, o sea, en unas 48 horas, tal vez el jueves en la tarde o noche, como huracán categoría 1. La extensión de los vientos de intensidad de tormenta tropical justo llega a la zona de la costa. Es la zona que ven aquí en amarillo, un poco más brillante, un poco más pronunciado. Esa zona de vientos de intensidad de tormenta, o sea, de 39 millas por hora o más, estaría pegadita a la costa, dada esta trayectoria. Si se acerca un poco más, los vientos de intensidad de tormenta van a llegar aquí. Ahora, también hay que recordar que estaríamos en todo momento en el lado débil de Hanna, o sea, el lado más activo, el lado con la mayor cantidad de lluvia, el lado con la mayor cantidad de viento, es siempre el lado derecho del sistema. Y esta noche, otra vez, los modelos de pronóstico indican de que debería moverse hacia el noroeste. No hay ningún modelo que lo trae hacia Miami, todos los traen al este de aquí, pero siempre hemos estado muy pendientes y un poco preocupados dada la errática trayectoria que ha llevado hasta el momento. Así que sencillamente observémosla. Vamos a ver cómo se comporta mañana, que debería ser el día que comience este famoso movimiento hacia el noroeste. Y vamos a ver qué intensidad tenga, porque en estos momentos está bastante desorganizada en las imágenes de satélite. De mayor preocupación tal vez es la tormenta tropical Ike. Ike está localizada ya a menos de 1000 millas al este de las Antillas Menores. Debo comentar también de Josephine, vamos a hablar de Ike en breve, pero debo comentar de Josephine, que está localizada al suroeste de las islas de Cabo Verde. Este sistema sí que está lejos, cerca de la costa africana, vientos de 50 millas por hora, y Josephine va a llevar un rumbo que tal parece nos va a librar a todos de peligro, porque se va a mover en general hacia el oeste-noroeste, y para el fin de semana estaría sobre mar abierto, además no se intensificaría mucho. Ahora sí, de mayor preocupación, Ike, como les comentaba hace un momento, como ven, organizándose esta noche un poco más. Es pequeño este ciclón, pero aún así es uno que pudiera ser bastante intenso. Por el momento los vientos son de 65 millas por hora, pero debe fortalecerse y convertirse en huracán. Está, como les dije, a menos de 1000 millas al este de las islas de Sotavento. Se anticipa que siga en ese rumbo en general hacia el oeste o tal vez oeste-noroeste. Y como ha sido la tendencia con tanto Gustav como la nueva tormenta Hanna, pudiera haber un giro un poco más hacia el suroeste, de aquí a 72 horas, como huracán categoría 2, entonces al norte de Puerto Rico y dirigiéndose hacia las Islas Bahamas. Y de aquí al fin de semana estamos hablando de que la zona de riesgo comprende las Bahamas, Cuba, también apenas llegando aquí a la zona del sur de la Florida. Así que anticipo que ya para mañana nosotros vamos a estar en esa zona de riesgo de Ike. Y Ike probablemente va a ser un ciclón con cual vamos a tener que lidiar aquí en la Florida, donde exactamente nos está.
It's tropical update time, always 10 before the top of the hour. We have a lot to talk about. 3 tropical systems we're tracking: Hanna, Ike, and Josephine. Hanna will be impacting the East Coast first. Here's Vivian now with more.
And we are definitely getting in the new advisories from the National Hurricane Center on all 3 of these systems, and we'll have that for you graphically right at the top of the hour, so you want to stay tuned for that. But I wanted to show you the broad satellite picture of all of these systems. Of course, Gustav has already come on shore, still bringing heavy rain across parts of the Central Plains, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But also, now we're watching Hanna. It is a tropical storm still as it moves across the southern areas of the Bahamas and the Turks and the Caicos Islands. And then we have Tropical Storm Ike here that is moving across the central Atlantic. And then, of course, there is Josephine. Josephine is the farthest away of the 3. So we have quite a while to watch Josephine. But let's give you the lowdown on all 3 of these systems. And, of course, we'll begin with Tropical Storm Hanna. Again, a new advisory coming out on Hanna, and we'll definitely have that for you. But as of the 11 o'clock advisory, then then make a turn to the north and west, and that'll take it across the Bahamas. Now, hurricane warnings have been issued for the Turks, the Caicos, as well as the central and southern Bahamas, and a hurricane watch has been issued for the northern Bahamas, including Freeport and Nassau and Grand Bahama Island. So we are definitely watching Hanna very, very closely. Here is a look at the overall projected path, again, crossing over the Bahamas and then eventually making its way to the mid-Atlantic coast as we head toward this upcoming weekend, and maybe on Saturday spreading rain into the northeast. I know the U.S. Open is going on this weekend, the finals anyway, and definitely we'll keep tabs on Hanna for you and see how it will impact the U.S. Open. And then there was Ike. Now, Ike is perhaps the greatest of the three in terms of its potential to become a major hurricane as we go through time. This is the 11 o'clock advisory on Ike, but just based on the satellite picture, you could see that Ike is a very well-organized tropical storm. It's fairly small in size, but you can see that we're getting some of the convection wrapping around this center of circulation. So it is really getting more organized as it's barreling off to the west, almost like a bowling ball here. And we think it'll continue moving off to the north and west and then jaunt a little bit to the south, bringing it closer to the Bahamas again. Okay, now there's Josephine. Here's the latest on Josephine. Josephine, too, is moving to the west, but again, because it's farther out in the Atlantic, we have quite some time to watch Josephine for you, but we think that it'll just continue making its way off to the west as we go through time. So we'll keep you updated, of course, on Hanna, on Ike, and on Josephine. Now, with the very latest on what's still going on with Gustav, here's Nick.
Yeah, there's Gustav still, and it's a tropical depression, but will become extratropical very soon. The area of low pressure that is and will continue to be the remnants of Gustav, interacting with a front, providing very heavy rainfall through the center of the nation tomorrow. Portions of the Midwest are just going to get soaked, and then it weakens a bit as it moves a little bit toward the north and toward the east. Around the Great Lakes, still some showers and some thunderstorms from Chicago to Indianapolis on into the Ohio Valley. But it is really doing a job of not only causing flooding, but also tornado possibilities, particularly into Louisiana and into Mississippi. New watch out until this evening, and new warnings out here for the southern.
Sitting here right now is finally starting to move away, and the models are picking up on that, and they still suggest that this is going to take a turn towards the northwest, and it will be an East Coast event. It looks like for the time being Florida is out of danger, but remember that these systems tend to move east or west, so there's still the possibility that it could get a little closer to us. That's why we should always be monitoring systems, especially when they're this close to South Florida. It should become a Category 1 system by the northwestern Bahamas and then make a turn towards the Carolinas. Here's the close-up view. Category 1 system Saturday morning, anywhere between South Carolina, North Carolina, or Virginia. And then it will continue to track towards the northeast, possibly impacting New York as a tropical storm. Here is Hanna. Center of circulation is right here. There's a lot of dry air filtering in, and that's keeping it in check. But over the next 12 to 24 hours, that will disappear, and it will give Hanna the chance to strengthen. 60-mile-per-hour winds finally moving north-northwest at 10, sitting just south of the Caicos. Now let's take a look at Tropical Storm Ike. No longer a tropical storm. This has been upgraded to a hurricane. It is looking very good on satellite imagery. There's the center of circulation. At any time you see those dark colors wrapping around the center, you know that we have a strong system on our hands. Category 1, the winds are up to 80 miles per hour now, 21.6 north, 52.7 west, moving rapidly towards the west-northwest at 18, over 1,000 miles away from the Leeward Islands. Now, this is the forecast cone. This high-pressure system will continue to push it towards the west. Category 1, Category 2, and then take a look by Sunday, very close to eastern Cuba. It will become a Category 3 system. That is not good. That is a major system in our hands. It looks like it will continue to track towards the northwest. Monday at 2 o'clock, still a Category 3 system, very close to where Hanna is now. This is the one that we're really going to have to pay attention to here in the days to come, because it could be a very, very strong hurricane by the time it approaches the Florida waters. There is also another system out here, Tropical Storm Josephine, off of the Cape Verde Islands. It was looking rather impressive this afternoon, but now the very latest images, well, it looks a little weak. It's staying as a tropical storm, 60-mile-per-hour winds, 375 miles west of the Cape Verde Islands. The forecast cone right now, it's staying as a tropical storm, and they're figuring that it'll probably fall apart sometime Sunday and Monday right in the wake of Hurricane Ike.
Created at 5 o'clock, and since the 5 o'clock advisory, an eye has emerged here on the IR satellite imagery. You can see that right in through there, so we expect at the intermediate advisory at 8 o'clock for this to actually go up in intensity. But for now, we are watching a hurricane here that continues to grow, and we are now seeing an eye on the satellite representation. Here was the numbers at 5 o'clock. 80-mile-per-hour sustained winds gusting to 100, movement west-northwest at 18, the pressure at 984 millibars. And in time, here's the forecast track. A major hurricane Sunday into Monday. South Florida is in the forecast cone, and there is a lot of uncertainty here as you notice a little dip to the south and a turn slightly to the north. I want to bring Max in now to talk to us about what the computer models are doing and what's steering Ike here in the days to come.
Okay, and it is an interesting track here, kind of west-northwest, and then westward, then west-southwest, and back to the west, and a little bit more to the west-northwest here at the end. I'll show you why the hurricane center is doing that here. You can also note here, if you look at the color, they're strengthening here in the short term for the next 12 to 24 hours, but then some of that outflow that Trent was talking about there with Hanna is going to be coming down over the northern side of Ike. So it may likely weaken somewhat here on Saturday in this time period right here, but once it gets close to the Bahamas, the water temperatures are very favorable, and the upper level environment will become very, very favorable again here. So the most likely scenario is to be looking at a major hurricane here in the central Bahamas here within 5 days. No one can tell you with any certainty exactly where this is going to impact the United States. And when the Hurricane Center is forecasting it here, they know the uncertainties involved. It could very easily be up here or closer to Jamaica, or it could be closer to South Florida. We're just going to have to wait and see. Looking at the computer models, you can see why they made that forecast up and down like they did here. This yellow model here is one of the good models. That's from the United Kingdom Meteorological Office. The green one here is the Global Forecast System of the National Weather Service. The blue one is the GFDL model. And so these are all the more credible models, and you can see the scatter. That's more scatter than we really like to see with something like this.
All right, Max, and showing those models there, we've been talking about the steering currents the past couple of days.
Como ven, en estas últimas 2 o 3 imágenes de esta secuencia, ya tiene un ojo del huracán bien definido sobre mar abierto, localizado a varios cientos de millas al este del arco de las Antillas Menores. Alguna referencia geográfica para ustedes. Aquí están las Antillas Menores, ahí está Puerto Rico, y Ike, como ven, debe pasar cómodamente al norte de Puerto Rico durante el fin de semana, específicamente el sábado. Por el momento les dije los vientos 80 millas por hora, su traslación oeste-noroeste 18 millas por hora, presión central ya ha bajado a 984 milibaras. ¿Cuál es la situación sinóptica? ¿Cuál es la situación meteorológica que está rigiendo el movimiento de Ike por el momento? De nuevo, referencia geográfica para ustedes. Ahí está la zona caribeña. Un sistema de alta presión está sobre el medio Atlántico y Ike está moviéndose hacia el oeste-noroeste en la parte, digamos, suroccidental de esta alta, pero va a haber cambios y ahí es donde surge una situación donde es posible que Ike empiece a desplazarse un poco más hacia el suroeste. Se fortalece otro sistema de alta presión en el extremo oeste del Océano Atlántico y cuando eso suceda, Ike o va a ir directamente hacia el oeste o inclusive pudiera inclinarse un poquito más hacia el suroeste y después este mismo anticiclón se retiraría. Y existe la posibilidad de aquí a 6 días, 7 días, que Ike empiece una curva hacia el norte. Pero, ¿cuándo de esa curva? Esa es la gran interrogante. Y por el momento, esta es la proyección del Centro Nacional de Huracanes. Un huracán categoría 2, pasando al norte de Puerto Rico en unas 48 a 72 horas, y luego inclinándose hacia la zona de las Bahamas. Y como ven, indicios del comienzo de esa curva hacia el norte en esta imagen del Centro de Huracanes, pero repito, hay gran interrogante. ¿Sería más tarde ese giro hacia el norte? ¿Sería más temprano y sería por aquí? No se sabe, pero nosotros estamos prácticamente en el medio de esta zona de riesgo. Como pueden apreciar, ya la zona metropolitana del sureste de la Florida está dentro de esa zona de riesgo y por eso es la preocupación de que Ike pudiera ser un huracán floridano y pudiera ser fuerte también. Ya tiene un ojo bien formado, probablemente se convertirá en un fuerte ciclón.
Storm. Earlier today at 8 o'clock, the National Hurricane Center released an intermediate advisory at 8. Now, typically, we only get updates on latitude, longitude, and wind speed, but tonight, a full special advisory as some major changes with the intensity with Ike. Notice here at the 11 o'clock hour, a well-defined eye on the satellite imagery as a small, compact storm and a powerful one continues to churn out in the Atlantic. 11 o'clock tonight, winds up to 135 miles per hour. At 8 o'clock tonight, it was a Category 3 storm. Now it is up to a Category 4 hurricane with gusts up to 160, moving west-northwest at 17 miles per hour. Here's the forecast track. We're going to play it all the way through the 120-hour time frame, and you can see a Category 4 is forecast once again by 8 o'clock on Monday with a slight weakening to a Category 3 here. And notice a little dip and turn here in the forecast track. I want to go over to Max, and Max, we really need to talk about a couple things. Big changes in intensity with Ike and also this forecast track. Bring us up to speed.
And what happened on the intensity, this would likely not happen like this near land because we'd have aircraft reconnaissance. This really demonstrates how important that is when the, this far out, you don't fly reconnaissance aircraft out there. You really can't afford to,
Muy buenos días. Aquí tenemos a Ike, más o menos a unas 600 millas al noreste de Puerto Rico. Se está moviendo rumbo hacia el oeste-noroeste. Como decía Iván, tiene vientos de 145 millas por hora. Está en la categoría 4 de la escala Saffir-Simpson. Más hacia el oeste vemos a Hanna, que se está moviendo al norte de las Bahamas. Pero vamos a empezar con Ike. Como les decía, está en la categoría 4 de la escala Saffir-Simpson. Es un huracán bastante intenso, es un huracán muy peligroso y se está moviendo rumbo hacia el oeste-noroeste. Debiera debilitarse porque va a encontrar condiciones un poco más favorables en los niveles superiores de la atmósfera, pero igualmente se va a mantener como un huracán categoría mayor, según indica el pronóstico del Centro Nacional de Huracanes, y debería estar tratando de curvar hacia el norte una vez que llegue otra vez hacia el centro o el grupo norte de las Bahamas, y tal vez moverse posteriormente a esto paralelo a las costas de los Estados Unidos, siguiendo una trayectoria similar a la de Hanna. De todas maneras, se va a acercar peligrosamente el lunes al sur de la Florida, así que hay que estarlo vigilando bien de cerca, todavía no se sabe. Estos son más o menos los modelos siempre que tienen más acertación, que están pronosticando la trayectoria de Ike para los próximos días. Como ven, algunos lo tiran un poco más al sur, otros un poco más al norte, pero todos más o menos están de acuerdo que haría la curvatura bordeando una zona de altas presiones en los niveles medios de la atmósfera que está aquí en el Atlántico, y además por los Estados Unidos más o menos por el lunes estará moviéndose una vaguada, es decir, una área de bajas presiones con vientos del sur que también ayudarían entonces a Ike a tomar una trayectoria un poco más hacia el norte.
We have Tropical Storm Hanna, Hurricane Category 4 Hurricane Ike that we're watching, as well as Tropical Storm Josephine. We're going to start with Hurricane Ike. It has intensified overnight, and you can see why. Take a look at this satellite imagery. It's very small and compact. You can see that counterclockwise spin. It's really grabbing all the warm and heat and energy from the Atlantic waters and using it to its advantage as it makes its way towards the west. You can see the eye as well, still continuing more towards the west-northwest. The latest cone that we have of the 5 o'clock advisory is the National Hurricane Center is fluctuating with this system. We still have the Bermuda High to the north, the trade winds to the south. This will be the component that veers the system towards the west. Now you can see it could possibly turn into a Category 3 as we head into the first half of the weekend, but the second half of the weekend is what we're really focusing on. It could take that turn to the northwest, just like similar conditions as what Tropical Storm Hanna has done. It looks as though it will be just to the southeastern half of the Bahamas. We are in the cone of concern. Actually, most of Florida is in the cone of concern as of now, and as we head into next week, we will be watching this very closely, especially over the weekend. We'll get some better ideas of where the system could be going. The latest advisory on Hurricane Ike, the winds are sustained at 145 miles per hour, pressure 935 millibars, moving very fast to the west-northwest. It's 17 miles per hour, and it's 550 miles north of the Leeward Islands. Let me show you the latest computer models. They're not quite in agreement yet of where the system will go. At least for the next 3 days, they know the system will continue west. Now from there, there's uncertainty on if the system will drive into the northwest or if it will take a southerly track. So this is something we'll be watching very closely. There are two scenarios that are really going
pattern for tonight as well as tomorrow. The big story continues to be Hurricane Ike, which is this very well-organized system that you see right there, very symmetrical. This area of disturbed weather, that is Tropical Storm Hanna. But let's take a look at Ike. Wow, you can see the eye, the center of circulation. That's where you're going to find the strongest of winds and the heaviest of the rain. That eye wall looks very good right now. You got the feeder bands coming across and also the outflow at the top. So this system, this tropical engine, is running on all cylinders. And there's really not that much out there to weaken it, except for maybe a little shear that could take a toll on it during the next day or so. High pressure to the north. Most of the models are still in agreement that this is going to track a little bit more west-southwest, but then in the days 4 and 5, a lot of difference here. Some of them having tracking straight towards the east coast, others towards Florida, the Bahamas, and even one of them has it moving through Cuba and into the Caribbean Sea. This is the official forecast cone. Notice now that come Saturday, it could be a Category 2 system. That would be great if it loses a little bit of its punch. I told you that there's a little bit of shear out here, so the National Hurricane Center has suggested that it could lose a little bit of its steam, but then there's plenty of hot water still here. Maybe by the time it reaches the Bahamas, a little cold water there because Hanna has stolen all of that energy, keeping our fingers crossed that it might weaken a little bit more. But right now, the National Hurricane Center has it as a Category 3 come Tuesday, very close to South Florida. Now remember, these systems don't travel in that straight line, so everyone here in the cone of concern should be watching Ike very closely. Category 4, 100.
Wish I could join you there, but you know the drill. You know I got to be out of the beach. A couple of questions. First of all, pertaining to the Outer Banks. Will Ike's waves follow Hanna's waves here, number one? And two, speaking of Hanna, what's the latest advisory on that?
Well, no change in intensity. It's still 65 miles per hour that are coming up to the north right now, but they'll be directed toward the Bahamas and eventually toward Florida. So this is the latest advisory, northwest at 14, really no change in our projected path. We've got basically a landfall late Friday night into early Saturday morning, right near the border of North and South Carolina, or just inside. Obviously, quadrant would be just to the east of the eye wall. And Hurricane Ike, still a Category 4 hurricane, moving west at 14. You can see the dots that I put on it. The track is basically west now. It was west-northwest. We expect that to turn now a little more toward the west-southwest. And as it does so, it's going to get under some shear, maybe weaken a little bit, but then it'll get under an upper-level trough and come back. So those of you, first of all, in the Bahamas are going to be threatened by Sunday. But if you're in South Florida, watch very carefully the progress of this because it's forecast to remain a major hurricane through its 5-day forecast here. So South Florida all the way up into the southern portions of the United States could be threatened if it starts to turn to the north a little bit.
De lo que está ocurriendo con Ike y además ir pensando en esos pasos que usted iba a tomar en junio, al principio de la temporada ciclónica, revisar sus suministros, asegurarse de que tiene forma de proteger sus ventanas, todo ese tipo de cosas que debió haber hecho en junio, a lo mejor ahora debe considerar hacerlas en corto plazo. Una cosa bien importante de Ike esta noche, ya no se está moviendo hacia el oeste-noroeste. Llevaba 4 días moviéndose hacia el oeste-noroeste. El giro hacia el oeste definitivamente lo ha dado esta noche. Inclusive se ve algunos indicios de empezar un movimiento hacia el oeste-suroeste. ¿Y por qué es importante eso? Porque los modelos de pronóstico llevan días indicando de que haría ese giro hacia el oeste. Y esos son los mismos modelos de pronóstico que están indicando que este huracán entraría a las Bahamas para amenazar muy de cerca a la zona del sur de la Florida. Es un formidable huracán de categoría 4 esta noche. Vientos máximos sostenidos, 135 millas por hora.
Just hanging on there as it's moving towards the west, trying to develop into something more, but it looks as though it's not going to be able to. It's going to end up running into some wind shear and really shearing off the system. We are looking at Hurricane Ike, very intense system. This is still a very strong system that will make its way closer to us. And Tropical Storm Hanna will be moving away from us, but as of now, we are feeling the outer bands of that system. So give yourself plenty of time on your morning commute because there are some wet and slick roadways, as well as don't leave home without your umbrella. Now let's focus on Hurricane Ike. Once again, Category 3 system, 125-mile-per-hour winds. Take a look at this aggressive system. The only thing we are noticing is that it is running into a little bit of wind shear, and that shear is really starting to shear off the back part of this system. Now that's in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere, but you can see the energy is still there. It's grabbing the heat and the warmth from the Atlantic waters, and what's happening is this system will possibly be downgraded to a Category 2 as we head into Saturday, but right back up to a Category 3 on Sunday. As it continues towards the west, the steering component is going to be the Bermuda High to the north, trade winds to the south. Cone of concern stretches all the way out to the northern part of Florida. Now this is different than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday, the cone of concern only had mainly South Florida and Central Florida a part of it, but now because the system is so really unorganized to where it could end up, they're not taking any chances. So because of the uncertainty and because they're not sure how far out the system may go, they're not taking any chances. So because of that, they have a very broad area underlying the cone, so therefore people can really start to prepare. And that's what you need to do this weekend. This weekend is the time for you to prepare for this system. O'clock, wind sustained at 65 miles per hour, pressure 980 millibars, moving northwest at 18 miles per hour, and is located 425 miles south of Wilmington, North Carolina. Now you can see with the latest satellite imagery, we're still getting those outer bands, and until this system really moves up towards the Carolinas, we'll still be feeling the effect. As of now, still very breezy conditions, so showers should start to dissipate as we head into the afternoon hours. And this system will continue to the north. As it does so, it will start to hug the east coast and basically be a problem for the Carolinas and all the way up towards New York. Tropical Storm Josephine, well, like we mentioned, it's trying to hold on into developing into something, but as of now, the latest advisory in the cone looks as though this system will stay as a tropical storm as it heads into the middle part of the Atlantic waters. Latest advisory, as of now, it's moving to the northwest at 9 miles per hour, and it's located 665 miles west of the Cape Verde Islands. Back home here, like I mentioned, plenty of moisture out there. You can see the outer bands of Tropical Storm Hanna really hitting hard in Broward County, I-95, 595, and 75. So give yourself some time on the morning.
We may be dealing with a minimal hurricane here as it makes landfall late tonight or tomorrow. Right now, the center over 400 miles to the south of Wilmington, North Carolina right now. And again, moving northwest, a pretty good clip. And so that is the one piece of good news, I think, the fact that this thing is moving pretty quickly, that we won't see the rainfall rates like we saw with Faye or with Gustav. There's the center right now. What we've seen here at Flagler Beach now, a wind gust of 40 miles per hour. So along the coast, this is the first tropical storm force wind gust we have seen. We have seen, though, about 125 miles east here of Cape Canaveral, waves over 25 feet with this. So this is a big wind maker as far as expanding out. Plus, we're looking at wave action as well. Of course, dangerous rip currents for a lot of people. Rainfall amounts, we've seen 2 inches of rain here in southeast Florida. And we're going to see possibly another couple of inches with this. Now, where it makes landfall, of course, to the right of the center is where we'll see the biggest water rise. Maybe.
We continue to monitor Tropical Storm Hanna. Here is the infrared satellite imagery showing a lot of deep convection around the center of circulation. Still not all that organized, and that's a good thing. We don't want this to become a hurricane. However, the winds are still 65 miles an hour, so that has not changed much from the earlier advisory. In fact, the hurricane hunters have been investigating Hanna, and at times they're finding some stronger winds, especially up at flight level in the northeast quadrant, up to 80 miles per hour. So there's still the possibility, because it is over warm water here off the southeast coast, that it could strengthen up into a hurricane. But right now it is Tropical Storm Hanna. Winds are 65 miles an hour. It's moving toward the northwest at a pretty good clip, 20 miles per hour. That's up from the last advisory. So that's good news for Florida. Bad news for the rest of us, though, from Georgia up toward the Carolinas, because that gives us less time to prepare for the heavy rain and the wind that is expected to come along with Hanna later tonight and into our weekend. There's a look at the visible satellite picture. Again, we're not looking at a very well-organized center. In fact, we don't see an eye with this storm. That is a good thing as well. We'll continue to monitor its effects, including the possibility of severe weather anywhere from the east coast of Florida up toward the outer banks of North Carolina, where already this morning law enforcement have already spotted a tornado. So there's always a possibility of severe weather with any landfalling tropical storm. Here it comes into South Carolina late tonight, or perhaps North Carolina tomorrow morning, and then eventually it really speeds up and heads toward the mid-Atlantic and the northeast.
Add that Bermuda high kind of dropping southwesterly, I should say, and then pushing Hurricane Ike possibly through the straits and then into Cuba. It appears for the time being that that high is actually starting to descend across the area. Ike at the moment is not looking as healthy as it did yesterday. That's also good news. You remember we had a good, healthy eye. Well, right now you can barely see it. We're also getting some very strong upper-level winds that are shearing the northwestern end of this system, and that is good news as well. The bad news is that most of the models are showing this thing getting stronger again during the days to come. So here are the very latest model runs. It looks like Ike is still going to look for this little opening in the atmosphere. What we really don't know yet is when it's going to make that turn. As we look out at Monday and Tuesday, some models are suggesting that it'll probably take a route over the Bahamas. Others still place it right smack across South Florida. And then there are a few that take it through Cuba and one that takes it clear across the Caribbean Sea and into the Yucatan Peninsula. This is the official forecast cone from the National Hurricane Center. They are looking at a weaker system come Saturday, down to a Cat 2. But by the time Sunday rolls around, it's back up to a 3. And then take a look at this. Monday afternoon is up to a Category 4 system. Now,
just looking at the satellite imagery, wanted to show you this. See these cloud tops? Dr. Forbes and I were looking at the radar, 59,000-foot cloud top. Normally a jet aircraft flies at around 38 to 42,000. So this is way above that level. If the hurricane hunters are out there, they're in for a rocky ride there, that's for sure. And because of that, we're expecting the system to sweep in and produce significant rain along the path. Now, even though it's moving fast, we still think it's going to slide along a frontal boundary. A lot of that rain will be north and northwest of the center, and that's going to cause some pretty heavy rain up in this area. That could cause some traffic problems, some flooding of the low-lying areas as it goes to the north, even though it's moving fast. So the inland threat obviously is going to be the flooding rain. The coastal threat is going to be
into the Gulf of Mexico again. How concerned are you right now?
Well, you always have some concern, but there's still about 3.5 to 4 days, and as we know, a lot can happen in that time. But as you look here at the circulation, it's been under this northwest and northeasterly flow that's pushing it slightly to the south, and now it's pushing back. Notice the flare-up at the see how that's coming back? It's trying to fight that away, and because of that, a very well-defined small eye is forming, so it could be strengthening and no longer moving southwest in the next few hours, but turning back toward the west, just toward the Turks and Caicos. And so we're very concerned that this system is going to strengthen some more. And if we look at the upper air, so this flow that was been sort of detrimental to it, it's starting to relax, and now it's pushing back. And once it gets into this flow, there's no detrimental flow whatsoever, and over here it becomes even more favorable. So we could have a very powerful Category 3, 4, even a weak Category 5 approaching the South Florida area over the next couple of days. The bottom line is our best estimate of what is going to happen with the track is basically the stoppage of this southwest flow turning more west, and with the trend back toward the west-northwest. And when that trend goes back toward the north, that's when it fills that outflow to the north, and the potential for further strengthening could occur. Let's look at the
still brewing in the Atlantic, and this also could threaten the U.S. as we head on towards it next week. It seems like week after week, this is the peak, but come on, this is getting, a little bit too busy here. Here is Hurricane Ike. Sustained winds 115 miles per hour, moving on towards the west-southwest at 15 miles per hour. And pressure is pretty impressive, 958. As the pressure drops, the wind speeds increase. And at times, this wind speed was about 135 miles per hour sometime yesterday. But just now, you're starting to see a little better defined center of circulation in I really starting to reform again. It's been under some northerly shear. That's weakened the system down from 135 to 115. But eventually, as it moves on towards the west, it gets in a better environment for it to breathe better and perhaps re-strengthen to Category 4 status. The problem here is it's not expected to directly hit Puerto Rico or Hispaniola, but at the western edge of Hispaniola, western third, that's Haiti. We already had over 150 people die because of rain from Hanna, from Gustav, from Faye, and now they do not need any more rain with Ike, and unfortunately could come pretty close to this area. Now again, let's talk about what's going on upstairs. This is the water vapor imagery, kind of an x-ray of the atmosphere, so we can clearly see a couple things going on. One, we can see Hanna. There's Hanna racing on towards the Carolina coastline, but also we can see this trough here. This trough has been impacting Hurricane Ike with that northerly shear. And again, hurricanes, tropical storms, these are vertical machines. When you have shear or things pushing it, it kind of tilts it and it weakens it. You need to have that straight column up and down to form that eye and also help this entire system to breathe in and then breathe out aloft. And the shear definitely interrupts that, and that's what's happening right now. But as it moves on towards the west, it becomes in a very more favorable environment for better breathing of this system, or perhaps better organization. The only good news,
actually have a third system out there in the Atlantic as well. Through the evening, we'll get to all three. So here's Hanna right now. You can see some of the darker browns here, indicative of some of the higher cloud tops, the bigger thunderstorms. It's maintained pretty strong tropical storm strength all the way throughout its life cycle here. It's been battling some strong winds, some dry air pulling on in. It has definitely held its own now, though, just about 100 and change miles to the south of Charleston, South Carolina. And boy, has Charleston and Myrtle Beach been seeing some heavy-duty rain here over the last several hours. So here we go, folks. Columbia, not bad. You're right on the extreme western fringe of all this rain. But once you head down towards Charleston, that's where all the heavy rain is. We'll see more and more heavy rain spreading through the Carolinas as well. You notice this red outlined area. Tornado watch, folks.
What is going on, and as you're waking up, maybe sitting down with that cup of coffee, we are still talking about a major hurricane this morning, even though as you open those blinds or just look out the window, it is a beautiful day here in South Florida. But as we are taking a look at what is happening with Hurricane Ike, we went ahead and changed the satellite perspective because now you see at the beginning of the satellite loop, it's dark, but the sun is coming up. This is our visible satellite. So with this visible satellite, we're able to look at the picture just a little bit more and see some of the thunderstorm activity that's continuing to rotate its way around it. And the eye is really not well defined for us as Ike is continuing to push its way down to the west-southwest right around 16 miles per hour. So as we look at the 8 a.m. advisory, not a lot has changed. If you had joined us at 5 a.m. and you were thinking about looking back here with us at the 8 a.m. advisory, I can tell you that the only thing really that has changed is the distance away from us here in South Florida and Miami. Right now, the distance is 829 miles east-southeast of Miami. That's almost about the distance from here to Washington, D.C. The wind speeds are still at 115 miles per hour sustained. That is a major hurricane, gusting up to 140 miles per hour. The movement is still on that west-southwestward track at 16 miles per hour, and the pressure has not changed at all. So not a lot of changes for us with this intermediate advisory. The next one comes out about 11 a.m. So we have a couple hours to go until then, and that's when the forecast track will be also put out once again from the National Hurricane Center. But talking about that forecast track, this is what we are seeing. This morning, the National Hurricane Center at 5 a.m., the 5 a.m. forecast thinking it will make its way, the center of circulation makes its way down to the west-southwest throughout the day today and into the early morning hours on Sunday, impacting the Turks and Caicos and the southeast Bahamas throughout Sunday morning into the afternoon hours, continuing on a southwestward track and then pushing its way almost due west throughout Sunday into Monday morning. So with that in mind, you notice the intensity scales goes back up to a Category 4 hurricane just near the coast of Cuba, possibly, or even over the southeast Bahamas, are trying to push its way down to the south. And with that trough, it's trying to maybe interact with Ike a little bit and shear it off. But the center of circulation, that closed eye, is about 24 nautical miles across. So that eye has really been holding its strength for us this morning. And even though this trough is trying to dig in and start to weaken it a little bit, that is not happening.
Category 2 hurricane. Granted, it's not the 4 that it was, but Ike still has the potential, folks, to do a lot of devastation. And I'm thinking that wherever the system ends up, eventually down the road, whether it be in Cuba or in South Florida, folks, it's likely to make quite a blow to wherever it ends up. But with that said, here's the Turks and Caicos Islands, the extreme southeastern Bahamas, the rest of the Bahama Island chain, South Florida, of course, Cuba and Hispaniola. And you can see right now just a few rain bands across Hispaniola and over towards Puerto Rico, which is just at the very bottom of your screen. You're going to miss most of this one. But, boy, it's going to come right on into the southeastern Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos Islands tonight. Well, hurricane force winds, folks. Those winds are up there around 110 miles an hour right now. The movement off to the west-southwest at 16. We have seen the pressure come down a little since earlier this morning, so that's certainly something we're going to continue to watch.
Though they are gusting to 40 miles an hour in Norfolk, Virginia right now, and out on the Delmarva Peninsula. Trenton, New Jersey just checked in with a 36-mile-an-hour wind. The heavy rain is the threat here. Very heavy rain, eastern Pennsylvania, Delaware, Jersey, flood watches all the way up into Maine. A stormy, mainly wet night with some gusty winds.
That's throughout the night coming up. Let's first, though, get a closer look at Hurricane Ike. And here you can see it as it moves a little bit closer to the Turks and Caicos. Its winds now up to 135 miles per hour, and it's just 90 miles now east of Grand Turk Island. And it's continuing on that forward motion at about 15 miles per hour off to the west-southwest. So hurricane watches and warnings remain up. We'll take a look at this. Yeah, Hurricane Ike is certainly looking a lot better than it once did earlier this morning when it was encountering a little bit of shear, but now it's certainly starting to get its act back together, and the pressure has come down, indicating strengthening. The winds have gone up, another indication of further strengthening. So now we're talking about a hurricane that is a Category 4 system, and it's got those winds of 135 miles per hour. So a number of areas still under hurricane warnings at this
image right there at the end, a powerful eye now
re-emerging with this hurricane, and it definitely means business. Here's the Turks and Caicos and Grand Turk right in here, the Dominican Republic and Haiti. Look at all these heavy rain bands that are getting ready to move across those islands, and the flooding concern is very high there tonight. There is the center of the storm embedded within that very deep thunderstorm activity, and there's the history of the track. You can see it's just been dipping a little bit down to the south, and it really has not wavered from that at all. The latest computer models on Hurricane Ike continue to show a good trend for South Florida and a fairly good trend for the Keys, but too close for comfort. Notice most of them tracking on the southern end of that across Cuba, and then by Thursday, moving into portions of the Gulf of Mexico.
Symmetrical system. We've got the feeder bands wrapping around the center of circulation. You can clearly see the eye, and it is tracking towards the west. Now, there is not right now a lot of strong winds moving across Hispaniola, but the potential will be there over the next 12 hours, and they are getting some isolated thunderstorms. Now, the model runs still insist that this high-pressure system will continue to push Ike towards the west and south, and of course, most of all the models have the system impacting eastern Cuba, then moving across the Florida Straits and into the Gulf of Mexico. So for the time being, the Florida Keys and extreme southern Miami-Dade County remain in the cone of concern. Once it strikes Cuba Monday at 2 a.m., it should weaken rather rapidly, moving over the high terrain of Cuba, and then it is expected to be right around Havana at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And as you can see, there is the cone of concern, southern Miami-Dade County and the Keys. Well, I got to tell you once again.
Prepared at least the basics of the 11 o'clock advisory for this particular newscast here off the top. What we want to show you is that this hurricane is a Category 4 major storm. And looking at the satellite representation, you can see a very well-defined eye wall here in the last couple of frames as it continues to move close to the Turks and Caicos. Obviously, a solid core of red showing up on the color-enhanced infrared satellite imagery. So this is still a very dangerous, very compact and powerful storm. And looking at the 11 o'clock number, 677 miles to the east-southeast of South Florida. Pressure still at 947 millibars, and perhaps the most important part, winds at 135 miles per hour, still putting it in a very dangerous Category 4 hurricane, with winds gusting to 160. At the 8 o'clock advisory, the speed went down to 12 miles per hour. Tonight, it is back up to 15, moving west-southwestward in its life cycle here over the next, say, few hours as it moves closer to Cuba. By 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, a Category 2 storm is forecast here by the National Hurricane Center. If you follow the center line here in the red, a Category 4 is what is forecast to make landfall on the eastern part of Cuba as it moves past the Turks and Caicos, over Great Anagua, and then eventually overland in Cuba. There has been just a slight shift even in this advisory to the south, with the center track that earlier at 5 o'clock was near the northern part of the island, now pushed a little farther south, but that cone, forecast cone, still goes into Florida Strait, south of Andros Island, and as far south as in the Caribbean. By 8 o'clock on Tuesday, a Category 2 storm somewhere here exiting the coastline of Cuba, and again, you can see that forecast cone, Yucatan Channel, are as far north as the southwest coast of Florida. Getting very close here to getting to the Turks and Caicos. And if we take a little closer look, these are very, very small islands. And Max, give a little geography lesson here on what those islands look like as far as elevation, height, and what they can expect here over the next couple of hours.
You know, I've been down to Providenciales there in the Caicos Islands a couple of times with the hurricane hunters, both the Air Force and NOAA, and just, you know, beautiful islands down there, but they don't have much elevation. So Grand Turk here and the Caicos Islands, they are really going to get hammered by this hurricane tonight, and the eye wall is likely going to pass right over that little chain of islands here. Here is Great Anagua to the west, that it's headed right towards here. Mayaguana is going to be on the north side where the strongest winds are, and then here's eastern Cuba over here, and it, you know, things are really going to go downhill for those areas starting tonight.
All right, Max, it's going to be a long night there in the Turks and Caicos. When we come back, we'll have a local forecast, so let us know what the forecast.
Hurricane Center continues to now have it at 135 miles. Those are the maximum sustained winds. That's been fairly consistent throughout the evening hours, but the forecast has it strengthening up to about 145 miles an hour before making landfall. Now, by landfall, we're thinking possibly heading in across eastern portions of Cuba at some point. Now, that's a look at the latest, and you can see by this latest satellite imagery where we have the darker reds. That's the extreme heavy rain right around that eye wall. That's where we're looking at the very strongest of the winds. And unfortunately, that went right over Grand Turk. And Grand Turk right now, as we're looking at this, just about into the eye. So they've been hit with very strong winds. In the eye, it'll be quiet and calm, and then they'll get hit again with the other side of the eye wall. So they are going to really be taking a beating here.
Yesterday afternoon, there goes Ike through the night. You can see a fairly well-defined eye as it continues to move to the west. There is some raggedness to the north of it, and it's not what you would expect when you think of a Category 4 hurricane. They're usually very symmetric and very round, very solid looking, but kind of ragged on the north there as the hurricane hunters continue to investigate. We'll see if we can determine what that means. Now here is the track, and you can see it has been coming down, but right here towards the end is where it looks like it's starting to bottom out, and we'll start that bend back to the right. And because of the orientation of Cuba, which I'll talk more about in detail in just a little bit, it would really have to turn pretty sharply northwest and start doing it pretty soon to stay over the waters there. All right, what about for us? What do we see in terms of scenarios?
We've paused the frame here to show you exactly what is going on, and you can see that center of circulation right in this area, a very well-defined eye. Thunderstorm activity on the northern edge and also on the eastern edge really developing. Here is Great Inagua, and that center of circulation not too far away. Here is Mayaguana in the southeast Bahamas, and the Turks and Caicos right in this area getting run over pretty much by Hurricane Ike. And Ike is continuing to make a westward progression as we do go throughout the day today. At least that's what the latest statistics are for us. Right now, the center of circulation 608 miles east-southeast of Miami. So in reference, that's about from here to Atlanta, Georgia, in distance away. Winds are at 135 miles per hour, as we've been telling you. We'll have an intermediate advisory updating the position and the winds coming up probably in about a half hour to 45 minutes. It's gusts up to 160 miles per hour, moving to the west at 15. Now, the forecast track will not change with that intermediate advisory. Just what changes are the wind speeds and also the gusts and the position. So the forecast track as of 5 a.m. from the National Hurricane Center has it on a west track the remainder of this morning throughout the afternoon and into the late night hours. By 2 a.m. Monday, possibly making its way onshore on the north.
Over Great Inagua Island right here. So we are very concerned about the impacts, not just there, but also to Haiti, which was devastated by flooding rains from the previous tropical systems. And unfortunately, looks like they're getting some heavy rain, too, with some of those tropical storm force winds that extend from the center. So as you can see, next in line will be Cuba. The system packing winds of 135 miles an hour right near the center of our circulation, right in the eye wall. In the eye of itself, it's actually quite calm, which is really just amazing thing about these hurricanes. But it is a Category 4 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale, Category 5 being the worst. And right now you can see the early visible pictures just coming in now. You can see on our satellite imagery, we're seeing a very well-defined eye. And yes, they are about to get it right here on that Great Inagua Island. So a devastating hit, we think, for the islands here. You can see the winds around the circulation, fairly calm toward the south, by the way, down across the Dominican Republic. But as you get closer and closer, we are seeing those winds basically coming in from the east at about 30 miles an hour.
Miles to our southeast. And if you look at the satellite imagery right now, the movement will continue here to the west over the next several hours. And a little close-up examination of this, you can see the eye continuing to move and a little wobble there to the north. We're going to talk more about what happened around the Turks and Caicos and Great Inagua and Little Inagua Island here in just a bit. But for now, this storm continues a little bit weaker tonight based on observations from the hurricane hunters, the Air Force, in and out of the system. Currently, they're in the system right now as the storm continues moving west. Here's that 5 o'clock forecast. We'll pause it at 2 a.m. on Tuesday. A Category 1 storm somewhere over the island of Cuba. And this forecast is based on the fact that the eye will stay over land here. Any movement to the north or south, this forecast will change greatly, especially on the intensity forecast, as if it's over open water, the interaction may be a little less and allowed to strengthen or at least maintain a little more strength in a Category 1. By 2 p.m. on Tuesday, you can see that Category 1 storm exiting the northern shore of Cuba. Right now, part of the Florida Keys still in that forecast track. By 2 o'clock on Wednesday, still a Category 1 storm. And this is when the forecast gets really, really tricky for the Hurricane Center. A Category 3 somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico by 2 p.m. on Friday. The computer models are pretty consistent about to this point, and then they begin to scatter, moving some of them to the Florida Panhandle, some near the mouth of the Mississippi and Louisiana, and some back towards Texas.
Case in history of a Category 4 hurricane making landfall in the eastern provinces was Hurricane Dennis a few years ago in 2004 in the southeastern province of Granma. Both Holguín and Guantánamo and Las Tunas had never in life had a Category 4 hurricane. So this is our main concern, to tell people what it is. We are broadcasting live from the forecast center every 3 hours and sometimes hourly to give every updated information. And the civil defense also and the local governments are working very hard to make people realize that we have been threatened by a very dangerous hurricane. So everybody is taking conscious awareness of this fact, and everybody is acting accordingly.
Mile-per-hour sustained winds. It is a Category 3. You can see the eye very clearly, the eye just making landfall in the eastern northeastern portions of Cuba with 125 mile-per-hour winds. Now, it was about a week ago when Hurricane Gustav hit Cuba. Gustav was a stronger Cat 4 than Ike is currently as it's impacting Cuba. But the island, believe it or not, still working to recover from the destruction from Gustav. We expect Ike to weaken, though, as it crosses Cuba.
Category 3 system, 120 mile-per-hour winds. It is moving west at around 13, and it should continue to stay on that track for at least the next 12 to 24 hours. There it is. You can see the eye leaving the island of Great Anagua and now moving in over eastern Cuba. Incredibly strong winds, heavy rainfall, and there will be a storm surge over eastern Cuba anywhere between 10 to 15 feet. We'll take a look at the very latest cone of concern in just a few minutes.
De Ike en 120 millas por hora entró en Punta Lucrecia, en Holguín, en la provincia de Holguín, Cuba, a las 9:50 de la noche, vientos máximos sostenidos de 125 millas por hora en ese instante, huracán categoría 3, y ahora, claro, sobre tierra se ha debilitado un poquitín, vientos de 120 millas por hora, pero sigue siendo un ciclón sumamente peligroso, y por las imágenes que vieron en Baracoa se podrán imaginar lo que está ocurriendo esta noche a lo largo de la costa norte de ese país. Por cierto, se han medido ráfagas de 120 millas por hora en Banes y de 82 millas por hora ya en la ciudad de Holguín. Y claro, todavía no ha pasado al norte de la ciudad de Holguín el centro de este huracán, que claramente no está tan bien definido a esta hora como estaba cuando cruzaba desde Gran Inagua hacia la costa norte de Cuba. Y eso tiene que ver con la interacción con tierra, o sea, la parte occidental del ciclón y también en la parte suroccidental se ha visto cortada, digamos, en su fuente de nutrición, que es el agua cálida que típicamente rodea un huracán. Al no tener esas aguas cálidas debido al territorio cubano, por lo tanto ha perdido un poco de fuerza, pero llegó como ciclón categoría 3, el primer huracán de gran intensidad en llegar a la costa norte de Cuba primero en 120 años. Consecuencias que pueden ocurrir en esa región o que están...
I left Great Anagua yesterday, and this is where it made landfall, very close to Holguín. Now the center of circulation is right over the island, and the mountains are taking a toll on Ike. As we take a look at the computer models, they're still suggesting that this will track over Cuba, weakening as a Category 2, then hopefully a Category 1 by the time it emerges into the Gulf waters. And here, the models are still in fair agreement that this will be a headache once again for Louisiana or Texas. The official forecast cone, good news, it appears that it's going to weaken as a Category 1, and by the time it emerges just northwest of Havana, it should be down to a tropical storm. But boy, look at this. Once again, back up to a major system by Friday and Saturday.
Landfall overnight as a devastating Category 3, causing some serious damage. The island nation already recovering from Gustav, barely getting a breather before Ike struck. Take a look at this amazing video coming into the Newsplex. The city of Baracoa on the island's east side getting hit very hard. The winds and storm surge sending walls of water rushing into the city. There are reports of dozens of homes destroyed. So far, no word on any deaths there in Cuba. However, in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Ike being blamed for some 60 deaths. It's estimated that more than 770,000 Cubans have evacuated their homes. Ike now working its way across the country, headed towards Havana's historic yet old decaying buildings. Thankfully, it is already losing some steam, and we are going to be monitoring the satellites and Cuban TV throughout the morning. And as soon as we get any new video or information, we'll, of course, bring it to you. For now, live in the Newsplex, Luann Sorrell, today in Florida.
Weakened to a Category 1 strength storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale. That means the winds are at 80 miles per hour right now, and the movement is to the west at 14 miles per hour. This puts Hurricane Ike 215 miles southeast of Havana, and it is still expected to move over the Gulf, and we also expect to see some strengthening. Here's Betty with the latest.
Well, we know it did not hit the most mountainous terrain of Cuba, but any terrain, any land apparently affecting this one as it has brought it down a few notches here. We're now dealing with a Category 1 hurricane. That center of circulation still near the coast of Cuba, but it is out over the warm water. So we'll start to see what type of impact that has on it as the hours wear on. Far-reaching as far as the impacts right now. You can see the clouds in association with this coming on up over the Bahama Islands, from Andros Island even to Grand Bahama Island. Southern Florida too, catching some of these rains. Some of these rain bands bringing in some pretty healthy showers as well. So we'll look and see just how much rainfall we managed to squeeze out here around Key West on up toward Miami as well.
Aguas cálidas del Mar Caribe. Ya saben, eso no estaba en el pronóstico. Se contemplaba que iba a cruzar sobre todo el territorio nacional cubano. En vez, se movió directamente desde Holguín hacia el oeste para terminar, como pueden apreciar, en las aguas al sur de Cuba. Está a 45 millas al sureste de Cienfuegos actualmente, el centro del huracán Ike, sobre el mar y rumbo hacia el oeste. ¿Qué significa eso? Bueno, obviamente ha perdido fuerza sobre tierra, pero acaba de salir al mar ahora. O sea que se anticipa que vuelva a cobrar fuerza sobre esas aguas cálidas y por lo tanto el impacto a donde vuelva a pegar, donde pegue por segunda vez a Cuba, pudiera ser mayor. Porque a diferencia de un ciclón de categoría 1 como es ahora, existe la posibilidad que tal vez sea un poco más fuerte al llegar ya sea a Pinar del Río o provincia de La Habana más tarde. Por cierto, como ven, los vientos han disminuido a 80 millas por hora, la presión barométrica ha subido y la traslación sigue hacia el oeste. A un buen paso, unas 14 millas por hora el movimiento de traslación. El aviso de huracán ahora es sobre todo Cuba. Todas las provincias cubanas están bajo aviso de huracán esta tarde. Y en los Cayos de la Florida, donde había una vigilancia de huracán, esa se descontinuó, pero sigue en efecto un aviso de tormenta tropical. En otras palabras, es inminente.
The coast of Cuba, the southern coast, and how is land interacting with the system right now?
Well, the good news is it's weakened rather dramatically. Remember, it came in as a major hurricane, and it's coming right along the coast now as the weakest of Category 1 hurricanes. So land has really weakened it considerably, and it's still hanging along the coast. It's holding its own, but it's not near as strong as it was before, and the wind field is much smaller than it was. But we do expect it to come off the coast a little bit stronger and continue to strengthen once it gets offshore. Let me show you this graphic that shows you basically what we expect as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, anywhere from the strongest of tropical storms to the weakest of Category 2s, and right now, judging by which way it's moving, it's probably going to be in the lower end here, Category 1 or strong storm, which will be good news. At least it's not a major hurricane when it enters the Gulf of Mexico. All right, let's look at some of the other impacts where we expect for Florida over the next 24 hours. Rain bands moving in this rain. That'll be where the strongest winds occur, and we do have tropical storm warnings up for Florida, even though the circulation is down here, hedging along the coast of Cuba where the biggest impacts are still occurring. Now, what do we expect? Also, waves.
Zoom in on the infrared satellite loop here. You know, it made the initial landfall over here, the Holguin province, and then exit on the south coast near Camagray, passing south of Cienfuegos right now. You can see the thunderstorm activity is really starting to flare up again right near that center. So even though it's weakened down to Category 1 right now, the conditions are still favorable for some strengthening as long as that center stays out of the water, and it looks like it's going to continue on the track here, likely passing between Pinar del Rio and Havana. And the storm surge values now, the fact that the winds are going counterclockwise like that, the highest storm surge values, 4 to 7 feet, will be on the south coast of Cuba, primarily on the east side of the eye here. So as the center moves along the coast here, that storm surge is going to be piled up on the south side. One exception to that here is over the Isle of Youth here, the fact that the track takes it to the north of there. Those winds will be pushing in on the towns there on the north side of the Isle of Youth here. But Just looking at this outflow, it sure looks impressive, and once it gets in the Gulf, it's probably going to be off to the races as far as strengthening goes. We've been
into the Gulf of Mexico, as Max said, off to the races, strengthening once again. A Category 3 storm making landfall as a Category 3, weakening to a 2 as it moves inland by 8 p.m. on Saturday. And right now that focus has shifted a little farther south on the coastline of Texas. So this is going to be an event for the Gulf Coast states as well, and definitely a news event we'll be following.
Weather is at this point, of course, with Hurricane Ike just to the south side of the island, staying across the Caribbean, but just pretty much battering the south coast of Cuba because we've been seeing that push of wind and the storm surge right up against the coast. For us, though, watching the band swing through on the northern side of that, but boy, you just go up to the lake. Big difference between Lake Okeechobee through the overnight hours down to Miami, then down to Marathon and Key West. We're getting closer to the center of circulation, so you're getting closer to the nasty weather. But it's just been a fringe here across the peninsula. Most of the strong winds from the Keys south of the Straits and, of course, into Cuba. Pretty flat track. We're very happy about that. Had the track been shifted a little bit off to the north, we'd certainly be talking about a lot more wind and rain down through the Keys through the morning hours.
Our menacing hurricane, and Kim, we want to know how strong it is and where it might go.
Yeah, might is a great word to use here, Kevin. Winds are at 80 miles per hour around the center. So the good news is this thing has not strengthened as it made landfall, a second landfall, by the way, here in Cuba. All right, so here it is now. You can pick it out right here. The eye, very tiny. I'm going to show you that radar in just a second, but you can see the high clouds streaming out here into central Florida. Now, the only part of Florida really being impacted by as far as rain bands is South Florida, at least right now. The pressure is at 965 millibars. Now, once it gets back out into the open water, Air Force hurricane hunters can get back out here and fly around this and fly into it and give us some more accurate readings. But again, 80 miles per hour right around that center. You know it's causing some major flooding here in western Cuba. It's moving over some higher terrain to some mountain ranges. Hopefully that will disrupt the circulation a little bit more. But some of those bands, again, that have been coming through South Florida, prompted a few tornado warnings, even a severe thunderstorm warning. Here looks like for Miami-Dade County at this point. Again, these bands moving this direction. So if you're in Monroe County, eventually this does get over towards you. Again, these things could spin up tornadoes very quickly. So that's the concern. Plus the fact that we've been seeing tropical storm force wind gusts with this. How about a 60-mile-per-hour wind gust here at Key West?
Ike, on the backside, plenty of clouds, plenty of rain, making its way up from the Caribbean Sea through the Straits and into South Florida. Those feeder bands are continuous. They are relentless. They're not giving up, so there's still the potential for heavy rain here all across South Florida. Now, Ike continues to weaken. Category 1, 75-mile-per-hour winds. It is centered 65 miles now southwest of Havana, Cuba. There are still...
Ciclón. Eso es claramente indicación de que se está fortaleciendo y claro, es natural porque ha salido de tierra y está sobre aguas sumamente cálidas en el Golfo de México y esto pudiera volver a convertirse en un gran huracán con gran intensidad en los próximos 2 o 3 días mientras va rumbo, tal parece, a la zona de Hanna. Aprovechamos esta imagen de satélite para que vean la cantidad de densa nubosidad en la parte oriental y suroriental del huracán. O sea, sigue lloviendo intensamente en varias provincias cubanas, no solamente provincia de La Habana y ciudad de La Habana, pero también un poco más al este en Matanzas e inclusive en la parte central del país. Lluvias intensas que van a acentuar inundaciones, aunque ya no haya tanto viento. Y también parte de esa precipitación se extiende hacia el área del sur de la Florida. A las 11 de la noche, el centro del huracán Ike a 120 millas al oeste de La Habana y moviéndose hacia el oeste-noroeste a razón de 9 millas por hora. Vientos máximos han aumentado ya a 80 millas por hora. Ike no ha dejado de ser huracán, aunque estuvo interactuando con suelo cubano durante varias horas, como bien saben. Y la trayectoria, tal parece, la llevará al área de Texas de aquí a 72 horas y probablemente como un huracán de categoría 3 sumamente intenso. Vean la imagen del radar meteorológico, van a poder apreciar aquí el ojo del huracán mientras se va definiendo mejor, ahí saliendo al norte de la provincia de Pinar del Río. Además, lluvias fuertes sobre Cuba, lluvia también en el área de los Cayos de la Florida y algunos aguaceros también que han estado llegando a nuestra zona metropolitana. Estuvo por fin lloviendo en Broward después de estar amenazando.
All right, good morning, Jade and Cynthia. Good morning to all of you at home right now. We're showing you the radar because, as you can see, Hurricane Ike is still pounding the western edge of Cuba. Now, I just mentioned a tropical storm warning is in effect west of Key West for the dry Tortugas, but then then east of Key West, the tropical storm warning has expired and has been lifted. Now, we're still dealing with some rain bands wrapping around Ike and affecting the Keys. So we'll take a closer look, because right now, although Marathon, you're getting a break from time to time, we continue to see those fast-moving showers and storms sweeping across the area. Key Largo getting hit hard right now. Down in the Keys, Key West specifically, we're dealing also with some fast-moving showers. So this will continue throughout the day today. And the southwest coast of Florida getting hit hard again because of the instability in the atmosphere. There is still a slight chance of a tornado. Yesterday, reports of a tornado that touched down in Key Largo near Marathon. So just keep that in mind. You do want to be very cautious out there and wait out some of these heavier squalls moving through. Now, the latest 5 a.m. advisory shows that Hurricane Ike has increased its wind speeds 85 miles an hour. It's still Category 1, located 125 miles north of the western tip of Cuba. As it emerges into the Gulf of Mexico, it is expected to strengthen possibly to a Category 2 by tomorrow. Category 3 possibly as we head into the weekend, could be making landfall anywhere from the Texas coastline to Mexico. So all eyes on Ike, especially in the Gulf Coast and Texas. In the meantime, locally, very windy for us here in South Florida. Those winds ranging from about 9